This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It is 3 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we will be wading imminently into the horrific events unfolding in Gaza and, of course, more broadly, the horrific events that have been unfolding in that part of the world since October the 7th. Let me tell you from the start that I will not, whatever you say, however persuasive your contribution to the programme may be, I will not be stepping back 1 millimetre from the position that the Hamas terror attack on Israel on October the 7th was among the most barbaric, bloodthirsty and disgusting examples of man's inhumanity to man since time began. So please don't even think about arguing that it is an inevitable upshot of the broader events in that region or somehow a sort of pressure cooker process that you use to almost or even perhaps genuinely justify terrorist atrocities. But I don't think you can justify what is happening in Gaza either anymore. I don't think you can do it with the arguments that the Israeli government offered in the opening days, which worked, the determination to pursue Hamas, to punish Hamas, to eradicate Hamas, but I think the impossibility of concluding that there is a rather different agenda in play and that agenda involves quite possibly the complete destruction of that part of the world to the point where nobody who was living there on October the 6th will be able to live there in the future. I'd love you. I look forward to you persuading me that I'm wrong, but I'm afraid that the continuing carnage suggests that it will not end until there's barely anybody left alive. Whether or not it involves opening up the gate into Egypt so that people can flee, quite possibly never to return, or whether they return under Israeli rule, time will tell. But the attempts that I have undertaken to see it as a kind of balanced or what's the word I'm looking for? A poised situation, this conflict. I'm not even sure I can call it a war. Israeli soldiers killed yesterday by Hamas terrorists. That bit looks like a war when armed personnel fire upon armed personnel, but when nearly 20,000 civilians have been killed, the conclusion that this is about killing civilians becomes increasingly hard to avoid. It really does for me. I'm going to play you a clip of the Israeli ambassador to this country, which I think if you... And I listen, actually, no, I'll do it again. I've done it several times. And I think it's important to do it again. I completely understand the motivation of many supporters of Israel who will be now indulging in enormous cognitive dissonance. You know that the events in Gaza can't be justified. You know that when you say it's very important to eradicate Hamas or release the hostages, with each passing day, with every child that's killed, that loses salience. It becomes ever clearer that is probably not the motivation of the government. There are two members of the Israeli administration who I'm going to draw your attention to today. One is the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom, and one is the Israeli finance minister, who gave a speech in Paris recently, which I am afraid has taken away a lot of my determination to describe what is going on in Gaza through a lens of reasonable response. In fact, given the quite correct condemnation of people using the phrase "from the river to the sea" on marches through London, a map of Greater Israel, alongside which the finance minister in Benjamin Netanyahu's government chose to give a speech in Paris last month, doesn't just extend the current borders. It essentially wipes out the country of Jordan. It essentially wipes out the Kingdom of Jordan. We'll get onto that shortly. First, I want you to hear from the Israeli ambassador to the UK, Tzipi Hotovely, who pops up quite a lot on British media. And most of us who have sought to cling to the conviction that a death in Israel on October the 7th is as heartbreaking and as harrowing as a death in Gaza just in the last 8 minutes. And I will never move from that position. However passionately you argue or however much history you cite, I will never feel more heartbroken by the death of a Palestinian child than I do about the killing, the indiscriminate killing now of an Israeli child. It just won't happen, I'm afraid. I won't go there. And when you are trying to steer a course, when you're trying to walk that tightrope, the one thing you reach for is the two-state solution. The only reasonable conclusion to this nightmare comes when there are two states, comes when Palestinian people can live freely and peacefully alongside Israeli people. Now, there are people on both sides of the conflict at the moment who don't want that to happen. On one side, they are terrorists. On the other side, unless I've misunderstood this interview that was given to Sky News yesterday, on the other side, you have the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom. So anybody who thought, and this is going to be a crucial part of the conversation that we have today, anybody who argues that the two-state solution is the ultimate end game, regardless of how much carnage there is in Gaza in the coming weeks, I'm afraid you really need to listen to this.
Two-state solution? Is there still a chance for a two-state solution?
I think it's about time for the world to realize the Oslo paradigm failed on the 7th of October, and we need to build a new one. And in order to build a new one...
Does that new one include the Palestinians living in a state of their own? Is that what it includes?
I think the biggest question is what type of Palestinians are on the other side. This is what Israel realized on the 7th of October. Though? The answer is absolutely no, and I'll tell you why.
Well, then how can there be peace?
The reason there is no peace
Israel
is because the Palestinians...
without offering a state to Palestine, how can there be peace in Israel?
Israel knows today, and the world should know now, the reason the Oslo Accords failed is because the Palestinians never wanted to have a state next to Israel. They want to have a state from the river to the sea.
So the two-state solution is dead?
Why are you obsessed with a formula that never worked, that created these radical people in the other side? Why are you obsessed with that?
Why are you obsessed with that? Because we've been told from the very first time I began to talk about these issues, we've been told that the two-state solution was the only viable peace that could be achieved. The alternative is the complete eradication of one side, the destruction of the modern state of Israel or the eradication of the Palestinian people in Gaza. And then subsequently, you would have to conclude with a very grim sense of foreboding, subsequently similar occurrences unfolding on the West Bank. The West Bank, of course, is adjacent to the Kingdom of Jordan, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. And it is to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan that I turn your attention next. It was in March 2023, forgive me, not last month, that the Israeli finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, elected to give a speech in which he claimed that the Palestinian people are an invention. An invention. This is the finance minister. I don't know if that's the direct equivalent of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but it's someone in the very heart of the highest echelons of the Israeli administration. He has described the Palestinian people as an invention. Now, I don't have the verbatim translation, so maybe there's some room to not be as shocked by that as I currently am, but that to me is at the very least dehumanizing, or at the very least delegitimizing, and at the very most, at the very worst, it is dehumanizing. I'm getting all of this, by the way, from the Times of Israel newspaper. I think it's important to disclose sources. And the speech was given, the speech in which he described Palestinian people as an invention, was given alongside a map on the podium. He stood on the podium adjacent to a map of what is called Greater Israel. And Greater Israel includes modern-day Jordan. So I hate whataboutery, and I'm very keen to avoid it. I don't think it's whataboutery to say if the river to the sea chant is so obnoxious and so offensive when it's done by civilian marchers on the streets of London, how the hell can a senior member of the Israeli government get away with giving a speech alongside a map that eradicates the modern kingdom of Jordan without coming in for rather more criticism than an anonymous civilian protester, a peace marcher on the streets of London? These are all questions that I want you to answer. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you will need to do so. So the Israeli ambassador says there is no such thing as Palestinian people. The Israeli finance minister says, I beg your pardon, the Israeli ambassador to the UK says that there is no prospect of a two-state solution, that there will never be a two-state solution. Why are you so obsessed with a two-state solution? It's time for the world to realise that there won't be a two-state solution. So that's out there now. That's the Israeli ambassador speaking on Sky News last night. The Israeli finance minister calls Palestinian people an invention and stands happily alongside a map that eradicates the modern-day Kingdom of Jordan. It literally denies its existence. A story that at the time got no coverage at all that I've been able to find in the United Kingdom, but which did prompt the Jordanian government to summon the Israeli envoy there in protest at the speech, during which he claimed Palestinian people are an invention while standing behind a map of Greater Israel. So those two things are really important. The coverage comes from the Times of Israel, and the personnel that we are talking about are senior Israeli diplomats and politicians. The Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom and the Israeli finance minister, part of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition and head of a party called Religious Zionism. Again, I'm working on the English language version of the Times of Israel for these translations. And then you turn to Joe Biden, essentially suggesting at the weekend at a meeting with donors that they don't want any solution with the Palestinians. They just want to punish all the Palestinians. This is Biden describing Netanyahu as a good friend, but saying he had to change. This is the President of the United States of America talking. This is the most conservative government in Israel's history. He referring to Itamar Ben-Gvir and others. They are a different, who we haven't mentioned yet. We've only mentioned the ambassador and the finance minister. They are a different kind of bunch. Word for word, pay attention. This is not translated. They don't want any solution with the Palestinians. They just want to punish all the Palestinians. And now I turn your attention to events at the United Nations General Assembly 2 nights ago, where 153 member states out of a total of 193 voted in favour of an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. So that, of course, would involve Hamas ceasing to fire rockets towards Israel, and it would involve Israel ceasing the apparently indiscriminate killing of Palestinian civilians, described by the President of the United States of America as motivated by a desire just to punish all the Palestinians. Joe Biden arriving, it would seem, at the conclusion that many people supportive of Israel's current government are of the view that there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian. So you've got the ambassador to the UK, you've got the finance minister, you've got the President of the United States of America in the picture at the moment. And finally, you have 153 out of 193 countries in the United Nations General Assembly voting in favour of an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. 10 voted against, including the United States and Israel. 23 abstained, including the United Kingdom. So the idea that the world is divided on this issue is hokum. It's nonsense. The world is not divided. The world wants a ceasefire. 153 member states out of 193. It's 153 to 10, actually, if we were to put it down to for and against. And the conclusion you can draw from that, I'm afraid, is not an opinion, is it? It's just counting. So anyone can answer this question. Obviously, the more invested you are in the region and the people there, the more considered perhaps your answer will be. But how can anyone now avoid the conclusion that the motivation of the current Israeli government is, in the words of Joe Biden, they don't want any solution with the Palestinians, proved by the Israeli embassy ambassador to the UK, and I quote, they just want to punish all the Palestinians. So removing at a blow claims about eradicating Hamas, because of course when anybody says it's all about eradicating Hamas, they refuse to answer the question of how many innocent deaths are you prepared to countenance in pursuit of that very unguaranteed goal, because no one's prepared to say out loud all of them, all 2 million, don't care. Joe Biden's come pretty close to saying that. They are a different kind of bunch. They don't want any solution with the Palestinians. They just want to punish all the Palestinians. So today, oddly, given that the American administration's support for Israel remains undimmed, I'm going to ask you whether Joe Biden's right or not. Looking at what has happened and what is happening, can you challenge the conclusion that the motivation of the current Israeli government is simply to punish all the Palestinians, while somehow simultaneously claiming, in the case of the finance minister, that there's no such thing as a Palestinian anyway? Oh, and of course accommodating the claims of the ambassador, the Israeli ambassador to the United Kingdom, that the calls for a two-state solution should now be ignored forevermore. It's 20 minutes after 10.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
23 minutes after 10 is the time. They are a different kind of bunch, says Joe Biden of the current Israeli government. They don't want any solution with the Palestinians. They just want to punish all the Palestinians. And I'm afraid that word punish, I think, is a synonym for kill. But I would love to be wrong. And I'd love you to tell me why I am. I won't even insist that you do it politely. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Gillian's in Mitcham. Gillian, what would you like to say?
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
I'm afraid I cannot tell you that you're wrong, because you are right.
Well, Joe Biden is right.
Biden is right. And at long last, he's admitting the truth of what is going on.
Well, we need to be careful about developing stories, because to have said this on October the 9th of this year would have been unsupported by evidence. And you might be able to draw upon precedents and previous exchanges and previous conflicts, but the scale of the destruction in Gaza is the evidence that provides the grounds for the conclusion that he has made. So I don't think it's a morning for saying I've known this for 20 years, because Gaza hasn't been facing the level of destruction that it has faced in the last 2 months for 20 years. Do you see what I mean?
I do understand what you're saying. I would say that the Palestinians, since the creation of the State of Israel, have been at existential threat of extinction, and that extinction is now taking place.
I'm trying to think of ways in which I could challenge what you're saying. I think that someone would say, well, all that has to happen is Hamas need to surrender, and then the extinction would not take place this time.
Forget about it. No, this has been the goal, the mission of the Israeli state since its creation.
That's not true, is it? That's not true. That's not true, because Yitzhak Rabin was the prime minister of the Israeli state that you describe. He was categorically committed to a two-state solution. Lots of Israelis have been categorically committed to a two-state solution. So you simply can't say that, and it doesn't help your cause when you do.
I will have to disagree.
No, you can't. You can't disagree. You can't disagree.
Yitzhak Rabin was an exception.
Well, he wasn't, was he? He was prime minister. You don't end up prime minister by accident with no support. But successive Israeli governments have been committed to some form of a two-state solution, but obviously the current one, as the ambassador has, I think, established without a single scintilla of doubt, the current one holds the idea of a two-state solution in complete contempt.
I'm not surprised about that at all. Why would the Israelis want to share resources like water and
well, again, you're doing
else
this thing. Again, you're doing this thing. Is that because I very carefully say the current Israeli government, you see, and you say Israelis, like you're talking about all of them. You describe Yitzhak Rabin, who has been prime minister from 74 to 77. He was the opposition member of the Knesset for another 7 years after that, a Minister of Defense for 16 years after that, back in opposition for 2 years after that, then another term as Prime Minister. How can you describe someone with service running into 3-4 decades as being some sort of exception? He was an intrinsic part of the Israeli political establishment. And it just, so some of what you say is clearly true. Some of what Joe Biden says is clearly true. But to try to remove it from the context of what is currently happening is just unhelpful. And it sounds as if you deny the legitimacy of the modern state of Israel, which I'm sure is not your intention.
I certainly don't.
No,
however,
yes.
I do believe, from what I see and from what I hear, that the extinction of the Palestinians is what is taking place right now.
And I wish I had a more robust counter to that claim, but I don't. All I have is quibbles. So I say, which would involve saying, well, if that does turn out to be the destination to which Benjamin Netanyahu is driving, partly to postpone or avoid the probable imprisonment that he would face on a personal level, or partly perhaps to enact what he told Max Hastings 40 or 50 years ago that he wanted to see with regards to Arab people, his words, not mine, with regards to Arabs in that part of the world. I don't know, but the counter, the quibble is simply that well, if it does happen, if the Palestinian people are extinguished in Gaza, it would be their own fault for not overthrowing Hamas. That's the defence I've heard. And that is the only one I can think of. 10:28 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Ronnie is in Hendon. Ronnie, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call.
Very welcome.
So I think this, there's some of the things I can discuss with you. Some of them about what was the finance minister said in Paris is I have no recollection of or know about, so I can't discuss with you.
Well, you have to, sorry.
Oh, well, no,
Ronnie, sorry, just to get the parameters of this conversation in place before you continue. This isn't the COVID inquiry and you're not Rishi Sunak. You don't need any recollection of it. I've told you directly from the Times of Israel. He stood in front of a map of Greater Israel, which involved no place at all for the modern state of Jordan. Jordan, what we call Jordan today, becomes part of Greater Israel, and he described Palestinians as an invention.
Okay. First of all, Israel has no. I am sure majority of Israelis have no intention or have any desire to have any part of Jordan.
He's the finance minister.
Yeah, but he doesn't necessarily mean he's speaking on behalf of what Israelis feel.
Well, he is the finance minister.
I know, but what I think.
Mate, so you're holding him to a lower account than someone walking through London with a poster that says "From the river to the sea" on it.
But I don't think he'll be finance minister when this war ends.
Doesn't matter, does it? You are holding him, the finance minister of Israel, to a lower account than some random on the streets of London with a poster that they don't really understand.
I don't understand what that means.
Well, I'll explain. Here is the finance minister of Israel calling effectively for the eradication of a modern sovereign state, i.e. Jordan, and many people have argued that anyone carrying a placard that says Palestine will be free from the river to the sea is calling for the de facto eradication of the modern sovereign state of Israel. So there's two people doing exactly the same thing, but you're choosing to either have no recollection of or to dismiss.
No, I've only heard about it since you brought it on.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is?
Well, it wasn't reported here, as you said, but
it was in the Times of Israel.
Yeah, okay, but that's not how Israel feels, and that won't happen.
Okay, but he is the finance minister,
and it's incorrectly said. I agree with you. It's a despicable thing to say.
Good,
because there's peace with Jordan. We want peace in the Middle East. We don't want to be taking over countries that are not.
The UK ambassador doesn't want peace.
No, okay. So the two-state solution, which, as you know, in 1948 we agreed to as two states, and the consequences of that was war. As you know, Oslo was 99% of the land was given back. Arafat came back, and the Intifada started. The reason why two states it can't happen is that Jewish people and Israelis don't believe we have a true partner in peace. If there is a true partner in peace, in other words, if you eradicate the outside forces that are causing the issues inside of Israel, and I'm talking about other countries, and they come to the table with a genuine desire and want to make peace, we've got a chance. And the reason why we're saying two-state can't happen is because we know Iran and probably Qatar don't want peace.
You're not explaining the words of the Israeli ambassador. You might be explaining.
But that's what she means.
Well,
that's
you can't.
What I think she means.
Well, yes, that's what you need to think she means, because the alternative is unbearable.
How can you make peace with someone that doesn't want peace?
Well, Yitzhak Rabin tried, and
right. And what happened?
He got assassinated by an Israeli.
But hang on, yes, exactly, an extreme right wing, absolutely, and that caused the biggest.
Someone who's probably pretty close to the views of Bezalel Smotrich, who's now finance minister. And yet you're saying the obstacle to peace are other countries.
We gave 99% of the land back. Oslo was 99%. Arafat came back, and the Intifada started, and also Rabin got assassinated. You're absolutely right, and that decimated the left for 20 years in Israel.
So let me steer you. I'm very late for the news, which is my fault, not yours. Let me steer you to this. This is the President of the United States of America describing the current Israeli government as a different kind of bunch. They don't want any solution with the Palestinians. They just want to punish all of them, all the Palestinians.
Well, punish is an awful word.
It's better than kill.
Well, it's still pretty bad, but.
Well, I'd change it for kill in the current climate, wouldn't you?
They don't want to kill all Palestinians. Jewish people are not like that, James. I
didn't let Gillian conflate the current Israeli government with all Israelis. I'm not going to let you conflate the current Israeli government with all Jews.
Thank you, I appreciate that. But the point is...
Well, I don't think you understood what I said. The current Israeli government, Joe Biden is suggesting, does want to.
Power. Once this war is finished, and hopefully it's soon, Netanyahu will not be in power. He will be voted out. He is finished in Israel.
I respect your optimism. I hope you're right, but you can't really, can you, challenge the claim that the current Israeli government does want to punish and or kill all Palestinians.
Israel and Israeli people are really angry at what's happening.
Again.
It doesn't mean we want to punish them.
But this is the Israeli government. This is the Israeli government, not you. It's what does the government want to do? What does the government want?
Hamas. Eradicate Hamas, and hopefully an ideology and a government can come into the West Bank and into Gaza, which is more moderate. I believe, and there's a lot of Israelis believe, that there is a lot of Palestinians that do want peace, given a chance. And they are uprising a bit within Gaza.
There won't be any left soon.
No, there will be.
Well, your optimism is touching, but unfortunately it's utterly detached from the currently available evidence. And I just for the record, it's not good enough, Ronnie, and I sense from your tone that you know this. It's not good enough to say, yes, these people are awful, but they'll be gone soon. You're talking about the Prime Minister of Israel. You're talking about the Finance Minister of Israel. You're talking about the Israeli ambassador to the UK. The idea that you're so don't worry, they'll be gone soon, when we're trying to have a conversation about what they are currently doing and what they are determined to do is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not disingenuous, because it clearly comes from a good place, but it is inadequate. 10:35. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:39. A little bit more, perhaps, on the politician to whom Joe Biden referred directly during those comments about the current Israeli government not wanting any solution to the Palestinian. With the Palestinians, they just want to punish all the Palestinians. Itamar Ben-Gvir has been convicted of incitement to racism. That was as recently as 2007. He was a prominent member of a group in Israel which was eventually designated a terrorist organization and outlawed by the Israeli government. He was photographed several weeks before the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin by the right-wing extremist Yigal Amir, holding a badge, a hood ornament, a Cadillac hood ornament that he said had been stolen from the car of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and was quoted at the time saying, "We got to his car and we'll get to him too." Other convictions, I think, but certainly exempted from doing military service in the IDF due to his extreme right political background. That's Itamar Ben-Gvir. And the reason why Joe Biden mentioned him specifically in the context of the current crisis, the current conflict, is that he has been Minister of National Security in Benjamin Netanyahu's government since 2022. So a prominent member of a organization subsequently outlawed as a terrorist organization. He has called for the expulsion of Arab citizens of Israel. The Israeli sociologist Eva Illouz has said that he represents Jewish fascism. He is, I quote again, widely known for his openly racist Arab views and activities. So I mention all of that just in response to Ronnie's insistence that the path to peace is blocked by Palestinian extremists or pro-Palestinian extremists, whether in Gaza or elsewhere. And I'm afraid that we add this man, don't we, Itamar Ben-Gvir, to the list that we've assembled this morning, the list that includes the finance minister who has spoken alongside a map. And remember, if you think speaking alongside a map is trivial, then you have to think that carrying a placard is trivial as well. He's spoken alongside a map that would effectively eradicate modern-day Jordan and replace it with what is called by some people of a loosely grouped under the title religious Zionists. It is called Greater Israel. He has called the Palestinian people an invention. The ambassador to the UK from Israel has dismissed the prospect of a two-state solution in a very furious outburst on Sky News. She went on to say that it would take months to do, in her words, to wipe out Hamas. But, you know, if the prospect of peace is overly optimistic, the prospect of eradicating an idea by killing hundreds of thousands of people is probably even more optimistic, for want of a better word. And since we've come on air, 7 minutes past 10 this morning, the current Foreign Secretary of these islands, David Cameron, has tweeted that extremist settlers, by targeting and killing Palestinian civilians, are undermining security and stability for both Israelis and Palestinians. So I told you that the shift from Gaza to the West Bank was worth keeping a very close eye on. And here is David Cameron describing it. Israel, he writes, must take stronger action to stop settler violence and hold the perpetrators accountable. We are banning those responsible for settler violence from entering the UK to make sure our country cannot be a home for people who commit these intimidating acts, up to and including killing, of course, on the West Bank, settlers moving into the West Bank and killing people who are living there. And, I mean, part of the problem the British government faces here is that this Justice Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, is a proud and prominent supporter of settlers in the West Bank. So I don't know whether his record would put him on the list of people that David Cameron would ban from visiting this country, but it would put the UK government in the curious position of being supportive of the current policies of the current Israeli government while having to ban members of it from visiting these islands on the grounds of their support for and or involvement in settler violence on the West Bank. It's not exactly clear, is it? 10:44 is the time. Michelle's in Totnes. Michelle, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say that I think that this government is a very honest government. They're not trying to hide behind solutions, etc. They're telling you how it is. And the reason
which government? David Cameron's description of the... Oh, sorry. I thought you meant David Cameron's description of the settlers.
No. So I was reading this book. It's called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestinians by the Israeli-born Ilan Pepe, who is the chair of history in Exeter University. And on page 56, I got to know exactly how my mum's family was ethnically cleansed from a village called Deir Ayyub. And he says in 1947, just before and these are his words in the book, just before the Jewish attack, the village had been celebrating the opening of a new school, which already had the gratifying number of 51 pupils. In 9 months, Ilan Pepe, the historian, the Israeli-born historian, has said 720,000 Palestinians were either killed or displaced. Okay, 50% of all villages were destroyed. So all these years, we've had to listen to Israeli and British and American politicians peddling the idea that a two-state solution is possible, which in the same moment, we had to watch Arabic TV channels where the colonizers coming from Britain, America, Russia, all over the world, taking the land of my family in front of us. And all the time, all they said was that...
Listen, I appreciate your emotion, and you appreciate I'm not party to the text that you're reading from. I am going to.
There is no.
I'm not disputing it. I'm just saying I'm not familiar with it.
So the settlement expansion has left very little land for Palestinians on isolated small areas. I've visited that.
Yes, I don't have time for you to read the whole book to me, Michelle.
I'm not reading the book.
I just want to steer you to
my words. Now.
I know. Okay, but let me steer you to the question that I'm asking before we run out of time together.
Yes, they are true. That is simple.
I need to finish asking a question before you can answer it. I think I know what your answer will be, but when Joe Biden says they don't want any solution with the Palestinians, they just want to punish all the Palestinians, that tallies very much with your analysis. But that's not actually what the Israeli government is saying out loud yet. Members of it clearly believe that, quite possibly up to and including Benjamin Netanyahu, but they continue to insist that what they are doing is pursuing Hamas and that civilian deaths are, if you like, collateral damage in that process. In a couple of sentences, your response to that argument, please.
If I bring a gun and shoot you in the head and then tell the world that I love you, will the world believe I love you, or will they believe I shot you in the head? The actions on the ground speak louder than any words.
I think I understand the point you make, and I think that I would add to that point that the National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who we've been talking about a little on the programme, announced after that hideous terrorist atrocity of October the 7th that his ministry would be purchasing 10,000 rifles to arm civilian security teams, specifically in towns close to Israel's borders around the country, as well as mixed Jewish Arab cities and West Bank settlements. So giving guns to precisely the settlers is a bit of a euphemism in this context, but giving guns to precisely the people that the UK Foreign Secretary has this morning described as persona non grata in this country if they deploy violence in pursuit of their occupation. And I suppose being in possession of a gun speaks perhaps to the potential for violence. Thank you, Michelle. It's 10:48.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:52, and I do sometimes... I mean, the reason why I've been looking into things a little further is partly because of a bit of confusion about the United Nations votes. Because if you rely, as most of us do, upon the British media to get your ideas about what is going on in the world, then the fact that the United Nations General Assembly, never mind the Security Council, which voted in sort of similar ratios last week, the fact that out of 153 member states vote for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza and just 10 voted against. Now, if you are pursuing your attempts to understand what's going on in that part of the Middle East at the minute from British newspapers and British media, the BBC, Channel 4 News, ITV News do a better job than the newspapers, but still you would be baffled at that result, wouldn't you? You'd think, how can that possibly be? And I think a lot of people who do what I for a living are just ignorant of this stuff. They don't really care that much about anything. They just check their loyalty card to see what side they're supposed to be on. So if you're attacking Gary Lineker today, you're defending Israel. That's the way it goes. It's pathetic and it's tragic and it's a grave disservice to the British public. But that's the state of the British media. And I won't go any further at the moment because I'd end up inevitably plugging my latest book, How They Broke Britain, in which all of this is explained in some detail. But when you start looking into it, you start to understand perhaps what the rest of the world is seeing, because I've introduced you quite possibly this morning to Itamar Ben-Gvir, who, I've told you what his background was. He's currently a security minister in Israel, and yet he has convictions for inciting racial hatred. Are you familiar with the former heritage minister, Amichai Eliyahu? Again, a member of, until very recently, a member of Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government. This is the chap who suggested that one of Israel's options for tackling Hamas in Gaza would be to drop a nuclear bomb on the region. That's all, why don't we drop a nuclear bomb on them? So when I say that they're not quite saying out loud that they think all Palestinians deserve to die, I'm possibly being overly generous or overly optimistic or naive, because if dropping a nuclear bomb on a population isn't proof that you think that all the civilians there also deserve to die, I don't know what is. And before anybody mentions Hiroshima or Dresden or anything like that, the post-war settlement, the Geneva Convention and sundry other international treaties, the evolving definitions of war crimes came into being in order to prevent repetition of atrocities. I use that word advisedly, undertaken by Western allies in the Second World War. So that's a cul-de-sac, that's a dead end that you don't want to go down. So there it is. 10:55 is the time. I don't know how anyone can challenge Joe Biden's conclusion that the current Israeli government don't want any solution with the Palestinians. They just want to punish all of them. And I don't know that anyone can really dispute my evolution of that claim, which involves replacing the word punish with the word kill, or at least remove. It's not genocide, so it's important to get these words correct and not to bandy them around irresponsibly. But if, as seems likely, the Israeli government is set upon a path designed to remove people born under one sign, born under one star from a territory, then I'm afraid the word ethnic cleansing does become, at the very least, a possibility, and at the very most, a probability. It's 10:56, and Hassan is in Boreham Wood. Hassan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. A couple of things. So you said it was in March where was the finance minister, the foreign secretary of Israel?
Yes.
In September the 22nd, Benjamin Netanyahu at the UN held up a map which didn't have Palestine on it, calling it the New Middle East. Their ideas of taking over the entire land, I mean, if you look at the 440 settlements up in the West Bank, illegal settlements under international law, which is making a state in the West Bank almost impossible to achieve, their actions, as I think it was Michelle saying, speak louder than words. This is what they're doing. This is what they're showing. There's a clear motivation of this government to take the entirety of the land. And the other thing I want to say is, when you're talking about Joe Biden's description, they want to punish everyone. We're talking about possibly 20,000 people have died. Now, I don't know the stats on how many Hamas combatants or terrorists, if you want to, terrorists have been killed. But, I've heard 500, I've heard 600. It's very difficult to know. But let's say 1,000. You're talking about a 1 to 20 ratio of civilians to terrorists. And they're talking about 40,000 members of Hamas. So if you want to kill them at that trajectory, you're talking about 800,000 people. There's no other way to look at this other than a removal of all of the people, or death or removing from the land.
Well, that's why I brought the phrase ethnic cleansing into the conversation, because it doesn't necessarily entail killing.
Yeah, I mean, so they've spoken before. I think I've heard on social media. I can't even remember who these people are, but they seem, government officials saying that Gaza was never a nice place to live. Now it's even going to be worse. Why don't they take the international community take them as refugees? There's talk about pushing them into Sinai. Let us figure this out, and then they can come back. Well, we've seen that happen before. The right to return is enshrined under international law, but denied by the State of Israel. The state of the West Bank, with the 440 settlements, illegal settlements, under international law, makes a viable state impossible in the West Bank. And they continue. And until the international community starts saying, okay, well, this isn't, you're not...
Well, what do we mean, Hassan? Thank you for telling me some stuff I didn't know already. What do we mean by the international community? Because if 153 countries at the United Nations General Assembly call for a non-binding...
They're calling for a ceasefire. What I mean...
No, I know you are, but what is the international community if that ratio and a vote can be completely ignored?
Well, what those 153 nations cannot do is to make it happen because of the vetoing power of the United States. What they can do is they can say, okay, you know what, until you start abiding by international law, we're going to start applying sanctions. Because this behavior should not be happening by a state in 2023. We are not pre-Geneva.
It's very hard to conclude that a war crime has been committed while the conflict is still unfolding.
How can it be anything but ethnic cleansing is a war crime?
But it's not.
They've displaced 1.6 million people from their homes.
But they have displaced 1.6 million people from their homes, but they haven't yet removed them from the land. So I think...
Well, they have from North Gaza. They have.
You'd struggle to prove...
They've ethnically cleansed them out of the northern part of Gaza.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just explaining what words mean to you. So yes, that is a displacement. But for it to be an ethnic cleansing, there would be no Palestinians left in Gaza. Now, whether...
At this trajectory,
again, you're interrupting me. And whether or not that is something that the words of people like the politicians that we've been discussing today, people like Itamar Ben-Gvir and people like the Justice Minister who called for a nuclear bomb, it seems to me fairly easy to make a case for saying that senior members of the Israeli government have come about as close as it's possible to come to endorsing precisely that. But until it happens, you can't describe it as having happened. That's all. That's all, Hassan. So in a court of law, you don't get a conviction by saying that, well, they were clearly intending to do that thing.
But what about when on the 22nd of September, when Benjamin?
I'm looking at this map now, and I'm looking at the reporting of it in a variety of sources, including Al Jazeera and the Times of Israel. If you wanted to pursue some sort of balance, and I don't know that it's quite the smoking gun that you think it is. It's an almost cartoonish map that has only about 5 territories detailed on it. There's more territories not labelled there than there are territories labelled there. And it was more about, as I think you know, it was more about championing the peace deal with Saudi Arabia. But technically, you're right. The map.
If you take that in context with what happened in March,
I am taking it in context, and I'm looking at 2 very different maps. The map in March was very detailed, and it eradicated the state of Jordan. The map in September. The one I'm looking at now, there's the picture of what Israel was in 1948, and it doesn't have any other countries at all on the map, and then using what Israel was in 1948, he's put the other countries in around it. But crikey, it does remove the state of Palestine. But I don't think that map was calling for it.
Then what's happening now?
Yes, I'm not arguing with you. I don't think that map was explicitly calling for it, but knowing what we know now, that map assumes a slightly more sinister, or a considerably more sinister.
And then also add into the 440 legal settlements in the West Bank, which makes a state there impossible.
Yes, and I did say at the outset this morning that attention seems set to move from Gaza and, not away from Gaza, but to include events in the West Bank. Briefly, Hassan, before you go, what do you make of David Cameron's intervention this morning literally at 7 minutes past 10 this morning, so probably while you were on hold, or certainly while I was on air?
No, I heard it while I was still on hold. I'll be honest with you, I feel that Words are empty. It's not.
But these aren't words. These are sanctions. This would prevent people involved in the settlements, which I think would include the Justice Minister, from coming to this country.
I would say if they sanction and they say anyone living in the illegal settlements, not just people that are involved in violence. Anyone living in illegal settlements under international law shouldn't be allowed to travel to the countries.
And that would include the Justice Minister of the current Israeli government, which is perhaps the most arresting mark of where we actually are, as opposed to where you'd think we were if you were taking your guidance from British newspapers and many British broadcasters. Thank you, Hassan. It's 11:03.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 7 minutes after 11. This isn't very nice, is it? I don't know how you feel if you have been supportive of Israeli government action so far. I wonder whether you knew about the minister essentially suggesting, well, not even essentially, I don't need to dress it up, the heritage minister saying in an interview that dropping a nuclear bomb on the Gaza Strip was one of the possibilities. He's now been indefinitely suspended from government. A justice minister who I think lives in a West Bank settlement or an illegally occupied territory, being justice minister despite having convictions for incitement to terrorist hatred. And he's the one that Joe Biden refers to specifically as not wanting any sort of solution with the Palestinians. This is a man who has a conviction for incitement to racial hatred and who has been a member of an organisation subsequently proscribed as a terrorist organisation. You know? And if you are so of a piece with that existential terror that so many Jews across the world feel at the prospect of history repeating itself, and that takes you to a place where you can and feel that you must support whatever the government of Israel does in defense of that territory and that right to exist, I would suggest, with no skin in the game whatsoever, except as a human and a humanitarian, I would suggest that this Israeli government is doing you quite a lot of harm. I think perhaps to have found yourself almost without realizing on the same side of an argument as convicts and enthusiasts for dropping nuclear bombs on the Gaza Strip, and an ambassador to the UK who dismisses in a deeply condescending way any prospect of the sort of two-state solution that Yitzhak Rabin dreamt of before being assassinated by an Israeli extremist, in an act of terror that was both predicted and called for by the man who is now Justice Minister. How do you carry on defending what these men and women are doing? How do you challenge Joe Biden's conclusion that they don't want any solution with the Palestinians, they just want to punish all the Palestinians? And you're a little bit ahead of the curve by dint of listening to this program, because I've been schooled by you so completely over the years, particularly from Jewish people and supporters of Israel, on the necessity of enormous carefulness. But I won't be quietened, you see. I won't be silenced. I won't stop talking about things because it can be discomforting. And I won't stop talking about what the current Israeli government is doing, however many texts or tweets I get calling me a Jew hater or anti-Semitic, just as I won't moderate in any way my condemnation of what Hamas have done by accusations of Islamophobia or allegations of double standards. The only conscience you can answer to is your own. You know what you are, and you know what's in your heart. I know what I am, and I know that condemning the words of Bezalel Smotrich, condemning the words of Itamar Ben-Gvir, condemning the words of the Israeli ambassador Tzipi Hotovely, and condemning the words of Benjamin Netanyahu, that has nothing whatsoever to do with their religion or anybody else's religion. So if you want to keep sending those accusations and allegations, I can't stop you, but you're wasting your time and stiffening my resolve not to be cowed by a really vile, actually, a real vile co-opting of what anti-Semitism really is and where it can really lead. Because calling for a bomb to be dropped on the Gaza Strip, condemning that, I mean, it doesn't even come close to Jew hatred or anti-Semitism. Condemning a man standing next to a map that eradicates the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. It's just statements of fact. There's not even any opinion there. And it makes you look really desperate, and it makes me think that you know that you've been let down by the Israeli government and that the world is waking up to that fact now, as is evinced by 153 member states voting in favour of a non-binding resolution demanding an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, and 10, including Nauru, voting against. 12 minutes after 11 is the time. Mo's in Eastbourne. Mo, what would you... Listen, the phone lines are open. If you want to challenge any of this, you're welcome to do so. But remember, I'm getting my coverage from the Times of Israel, and I'm quoting the President of the United States of America. And I'm referring to on-the-record statements and actions by politicians like Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who hold and have held senior positions in the Israeli government, and the current Israeli ambassador to the UK. 12 minutes after 11 is the time. And just to balance out the idiots, here's one. Do you understand how Jeremy Corbyn felt yet? No, mate. Jeremy Corbyn wrote a preface for a book that was virulently anti-Semitic. He offered support to an artist who had painted a mural that was virulently and obviously anti-Semitic. His defence was that before offering his support to the artist who had painted the virulently anti-Semitic mural, he hadn't actually looked at the mural, and he, of course, repeatedly described Hamas as his friends. So if I'd done any of those things, and I was being called anti-Semitic, then, yeah, maybe there would be a comparison to be drawn. But I didn't. So there isn't. And you're in Idiot's Corner. Mo's in Eastbourne. Mo, what would you like to say?
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm from Egyptian background, born here, but I'm bringing to try and defend Israel's position.
Okay.
Not as a reverse psychology type thing, but I actually kind of empathize of what's happening, and I can try and understand, having close friends and cousins in Gaza and friends in Israel, yes. Kind of understands both points of view a bit, as much as somebody living in the UK can.
Sure.
I agree with what you say about how horrible all the things coming from the very right-wing government in Israel are. But I think that's the best thing that is happening for a potential peace process. And the reason why I say that is I work as a surgeon, and sometimes you can't treat an infection until an abscess is properly formed and you've got all the pus, and then you can get it out.
Yeah, okay.
So sorry for the gruesome example.
Well, that's all right. I'm not eating, but some people might be.
Yeah, sorry. I apologize for your listeners.
No, that's fine.
It's not quite lunch yet, but I mean that in a very, and I truly believe that. So if you look at your average kind of Joe in Israel, they may be swayed one way or another, but as more horrible the right wing government is going to get, as eventually people are going to wake up and oppose it. Both in Israel and outside of Israel.
Ronnie and Hendon was pretty close to that position, wasn't he, earlier?
Yeah. So I think it's good, but the reason why what Israel is doing now can be justified. I mean, I'm not justifying it. I truly believe in not only a ceasefire but end of all war now. But the reason why it's justified if you live in Israel is that you've got the horrible kind of generational trauma from the Holocaust. You've got the many decades of they living in this land that everyone around them believes that they stole, and essentially everyone in the Arab world was looking at them as people are looking at people arrive in boats, as they were illegal immigrants that took over that land. And they believed that for many years and had many wars to defend that position. So if you live in Israel, growing in Israel, this is how you feel. So even though you think the Arabs are okay...
Listen, I'm listening. I'm hanging on your every word. Have you heard all the show today?
Yes.
You have? Because I thought I'd covered this.
Okay, no, but I mean, what I'm saying is the reason why it's not, from their point of view, it's not genocide.
Yes.
Is this is the only way they can defend themselves.
Exactly.
And truly believe that. So they're under continuous attack, and the only way to do it is to just try and knock Hamas out of existence. And
even if that involves,
kind of shrug,
because this is where we are today. Hang on,
they're
Hassan.
shrugging at it.
Yeah.
If you imagine the average Jacob Rees-Mogg supporter in the UK, what they feel about the Rwanda policy just by the UK media, you can imagine how the average Israeli feels about the Gaza war, following their propaganda machine.
Yes.
And this is where my next and final point would be, is that I truly believe there's peace. If you take an Arab and a Jew outside of the Middle East, they become friends. And I don't mean that in a poetic way, but it's true.
Understand.
I mean, real examples. We're very close people. We have very close roots. And
we can always find
goosebumps telling you that. And I mean that.
I hear you.
Really,
we can
really
always find
to me.
exceptions that would want to knock seven bells out of each other because of the sign or the star that they were born under. But the massive majority of human beings,
the massive majority,
are as you described.
They get along, and the only reason why they're not getting along is both on the Arab side and on the Israeli side for generations. We've just been hearing hate speech.
Clearly.
So the answer to it, I actually don't believe in a two-state solution. I believe in a one-state solution that for both, just like South Africa did. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think it should be one land for all people, but that will, and have a democracy that will be mixed for both people. Just you didn't have a two-state solution in Northern Ireland where you get some bits controlled by the Protestants. It's one country based on the UK. So this is a dream. I don't think this will happen.
And it's certainly not what the Israeli ambassador is referring to when she dismisses the prospect of a two-state solution. You're a little bit more John Lennon on this one. You're people living in harmony.
Because I really think these people can live together.
Yes,
they have, because they live together once you get them out. If
it wasn't for the pesky leaders.
Yes, so the answer is what we do about these pesky leaders, and I think with the advent of, it's now 2023, the way media is covered, the way social media is covering things, these things are more horrible things happen than the Gaza war in the last 40, 50 years on both sides. But now it's just so, it's kind of on steroids. So everyone is getting visceral to it and feeling it much quicker. 5 weeks is not a long time in the Middle East conflict, but we're having this visceral reaction.
But the death toll is close to unprecedented in this period of time. I think that the deaths in the West Bank are the worst that they've been in the days immediately after the October the 7th attack since the early 80s.
Correct.
We're going to run out of time. How do you? Hang on, I want to ask you one more question. How do you sustain your optimism against the very profound suspicion that the Israeli government is currently embarked upon a mission to clear Gaza?
I believe they want to do that. And if you listen to Golda Meir's talk in 1967, she wanted all the Arabs to move to Jordan. And this was the view. This is a view of certain people, which I actually, ironically, empathize with, because I think this is just what they truly believe. And they're entitled to believe that. It's not going to happen because the word's not going to allow it to happen, I hope. And also because eventually the average Israeli citizen is not that extreme.
This is amazing, isn't it? Because now we've got this problem of why haven't the Palestinians overthrown Hamas, and why do the Israelis keep returning Benjamin Netanyahu? And that puts some pressure on your points, doesn't it?
No, because 60% to 40% is fine, but I still believe in the 40%. The majority of Americans allowed black people to stay in the back on the bus for decades.
Yes.
And then it stopped. So bad things happen for a long time, and your average Joe just shrugs and accepts it.
I like you.
It needs education, and it needs education. It needs maybe also people not accepting bad things happening from Israel. And the problem is with the current history from Europe and the States versus Israel, nobody's dares to challenge them.
No, but you established why at the beginning, and I don't think it can be stressed too much. Actually, even if it annoys some people, but the generational trauma, and there'll be plenty of people in Gaza living with generational trauma. There'll be new cases of generational trauma that have been developed in the last 2 months. But the generational trauma of being Jewish is a crucial part if you want to understand the experience that leads to the support that some people find so baffling. I don't, but it is absolutely key to that. And you made that point at the very beginning. I thank you for that, Mo. I don't know how, but you've made me feel a little bit more upbeat, perhaps, about the future until I remember the question that I insist other callers answer, which is, okay, if you're buying into the claim that this is all about pursuing and punishing Hamas, how many dead Palestinian civilians is too many? And no one will ever answer that. It's 21 minutes after 11.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
25 minutes after 11, a rare word of praise for our friends at the BBC, who interviewed Alan Rusbridger this morning about that slowly growing scandal involving Robbie Gibb, the man who used to run Theresa May's communications department at Downing Street, for which he was knighted, and yet now somehow, as a member of the BBC board, sees himself as qualified to lecture other journalists on impartiality. I think I probably need to say that again. A man who used to run Theresa May's communications department at Downing Street and received a knighthood for his service, but now as a member of the BBC board thinks that he is somehow qualified to lecture other journalists on impartiality. And the allegation contained within Nadine Dorries' book, which sadly has proved about as successful as her attempts to get into the House of Lords, but did miraculously, thanks to Alan Rusbridger, we discovered, contain one story, one decent and quite probably true story, which involved this Robbie Gibb character attempting to influence the appointment of the head of Ofcom, the regulator that has responsibility not just for the BBC, of course, but for jokers like me as well. So well done to the BBC for coming to that story about a week. Is it a week to the day since we had Alan on the programme? I think it is. But it's always nice to be a sort of laxative to help ease the constipation that has overtaken some corners of the corporation. 26 minutes after 11 is the time. Did I just call myself a laxative? I don't know that that's going to be something I make a habit of. And speaking of habits, we must return to Grant Shapps and his multiple names, because somewhat remarkably, I've read some coverage, seen and heard some coverage that claims that when Gary Lineker pointed out that Grant Shapps has used several names in the past, it was somehow a claim or an allegation, whereas anyone who's listened to this programme for the last 10 years will know that it is, last 13 years, in fact, will know that it is a simple statement of fact. And there's a rather glorious bit of footage involving the journalist Michael Crick that drives the point home rather beautifully. Michael, of course, also the journalist who recorded Lee Anderson being too stupid to realise that he still had a microphone on when he was asking a mate of his to pretend that he wasn't a mate of his, but was instead a random member of the public whose door Lee Anderson, 30p Leenock, would just randomly knock on and open to discover that the random member of the public inside was a staunch supporter of 30p Leenock and his boneheaded policies. But again, a story that perhaps many people putting 30p Lee on the telly or interviewing are either unaware of or unconcerned by. So we'll have a look at that shortly. Before that, Mohammed is in Portsmouth on this question of whether Joe Biden is right. What would you like to say, Mohammed?
I might be going over things that have already been spoken about earlier on. I missed all of the... I've missed
Why?
a bit of the
Why?
programme.
Why?
Because I was busy.
Doing
I
what?
apologise because I think you're fantastic. One of the few voices that's very, very fair and impartial as a Muslim and a person that's been paying attention to what's going on and trying to be even-handed about what's been going on. I can't but come to the conclusion that finally politicians, or politicians plural, are actually going through not only with their rhetoric but actually delivering in the case of what you've just mentioned, Hotovely, Netanyahu, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir. Their rhetoric is now actually being justified and actually going through with what they want, and what they are doing in broad daylight, in full view of the world, is okay, I know you mentioned about the technical meaning of ethnic cleansing, but they are internally displacing the population of Gaza
You can say that they are trying to ethnically cleanse a territory. You simply, my position is, you just can't say that they have succeeded, that they have done.
No, I'm not going to argue the point on that, because you're right. I think to actually ethnically cleanse them, they'll have to move them out of Gaza. I get that.
Suppose, in a way, saying that there's no such thing as Palestinian people, saying that Palestinian people are an invention, which is what Bezalel Smotrich said, alongside the map of Greater Israel that eradicates the modern state of Jordan. In a way, that is almost a defence against future accusations of ethnic cleansing, isn't it? Because you could say there's no such thing as that ethnicity.
That's a very, very valid point,
isn't
and
it?
That's the thing, isn't it? The words do matter.
They do, really. Yeah,
I hadn't thought of that.
I hadn't thought of that before.
And the actions matter as well. And the thing that I can't get away from is the fact that when you destroy the infrastructure, the houses, everything in a population area, and then start to move them south, and then destroy the safe havens in the south, what are you leaving these people with? And the only logical explanation is nothing. And why are you leaving them with nothing? Because then it's a precursor to the day that you can say to the world, well, there's nothing there left for them to go back to. Now transport them to the Sinai, to other Muslim countries that at the start of this horrific, it's not a war. It's not a war. That's not the way to describe it. It's so asymmetric. But at the start
and by
of this
that
conflict,
you mean that exponentially more innocents have been killed than combatants on one side.
That's right, because the truth of it is that when Israel says that they want to do something, they actually have the means to do it. So it's not rhetoric. So they have done it. They've moved people. They've bombed most of Gaza to a pulp, and now they've moved the people into little camps or areas in the Gaza Strip that there's no way to live. I mean, the places they're talking about, safe haven, let's be honest, we've seen the pictures on Sky News. There's no way that humanity can live there.
We've seen some of the pictures, of course, because traditional modes of journalism can't get into to Gaza. I mean, from one side, because it's the Israeli government won't let them. From the other side, it's a little confusing about whether it's the Egyptian government. But either way, you can't get the foreign correspondents into the territory, which I'm afraid becomes part of the problem you describe, which is using words to describe something. If you can't see it, you can't really refute the words that people are using, can you?
No. And I suppose the thing that has been the most distressing is that we're watching this unfold in front of us, and there is no real way that any normal person with an even hand can do anything about it. We march, we protest.
You get told off for marching. You get called hate marcher by Suella Braverman even for marching. And today, of course, the Five Eyes, the three members of Five Eyes, the intelligence alliance that voted for the ceasefire 2 nights ago, they put out a statement yesterday saying, in defending itself, Israel must respect international humanitarian law. Civilians and civilian infrastructure must be protected. The price of defeating Hamas cannot be the continuous suffering of all Palestinian civilians. One of the key tenets of all those pro-Palestinian marches, which Suella Braverman described as hate marches. So if she was still Home Secretary, she'd be having to explain why she's essentially labelled Australia, Canada and New Zealand as sympathetic to hate marches.
And this is the
extraordinary.
Thing, isn't it? It's this Kafkaesque inversion of reality that our politicians are asking us to believe, just totally and utterly gaslighting us. You have pretty much the whole of the world UN saying one thing, and being tarnished as anti-Semitic
in this country and in America, but not anywhere, not even in Australia, where Rupert Murdoch's grip on the windpipe of democracy is at least as tight as it is in those other two countries. Normally, the three move as one. I mentioned earlier people who do what I do for a living, not really caring about anything and understanding even less, just taking the looking at their ID card to work out. Looking at their loyalty card to work out what side of any argument they're on. If you've got a problem with Gary Lineker or Black Lives Matter, then you must somehow be fully in favour of Israel. It's a mode of media. It doesn't describe that many members of the public, but it's a mode of media that's very much in evidence at the moment. Thank you, Mohammed. I'm very late for the news. It's the only reason I'm moving on. It's actually 11:34, so my apologies to Thomas Watts.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:38. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm going to read this because it's the only one I can find, and my inbox is normally pretty febrile on a day like this. But I think the fact that it isn't really is significant. Apart, I looked at the Jew hater, anti-Semitic stuff. It was all from the same number, so we can discount that on one level. But I'll read this in its entirety. So disappointing to hear your commentary this morning. All you have done is quote Israeli politicians on the back of the massacre of the 7th. Didn't hear any of the vitriol that has come from Hamas and its leaders. I have been a listener for 40 years on LBC. Sure, you don't care that you have lost me, but you have fallen for the left-wing media propaganda. You have called for a ceasefire without concern for the hostages, still including a now 12-month-old baby, and quite happy for Hamas to continue in power unpunished for their massacre. I do care that you don't think you want to listen to the programme anymore, and I hope you listened for long enough to hear me deal with your text line by line. So if all I've done is quote Israeli politicians, you can't really say that I've fallen for the left-wing media propaganda. I've often referred, when covering this issue, to the pledges from various Hamas leaders to repeat the atrocity of October the 7th at the first opportunity. But I've also expressed a very obvious view that there must be a limit on how many civilians die in pursuit of the unguaranteed goal of eradicating Hamas. So that's not true either. When it comes to the hostages, you must remember that the hostages who were released during a ceasefire. They were released during a temporary truce. So to suggest that calling for a ceasefire demonstrates a lack of concern for hostages who have only been released during ceasefires, I'm afraid that doesn't stand up to scrutiny either. And to claim that I'm happy for Hamas to continue in power when I consider them to be utterly barbaric, bloodthirsty savages who are doing as grave a disservice to the civilian population as Palestine, as Benjamin Netanyahu's administration, I'm increasingly persuaded, is doing to the civilian population of Israel, it's palpably absurd. And with respect, if you are still listening, the fact that you've had to reach for such ridiculous accusations in response to a program that has been dedicated to repeating coverage provided by the Times of Israel, reporting the spoken words of politicians such as the Justice Minister and the former Heritage Minister, and playing out a recorded interview with the Israeli ambassador to the UK, the fact that you end up accusing me of having fallen for left-wing media propaganda means that you're really, really close to realizing that you've been let down by these Israeli politicians and diplomats, not by me. I hope I've nudged you a little closer to it. Speaking of politicians, the claim this morning from a Tory-appointed, soon-to-be chair of the BBC, that Gary Lineker has somehow crossed a line in his comments on Twitter hinges upon the notion that what he said about Grant Shapps using several names to sell get-rich-quick schemes on the internet was somehow unfair. I don't think anybody with a straight face is going to be able to argue for much longer that BBC guidelines should prevent Gary Lineker telling the truth about politicians seeking to silence him. I mean, where's the Free Speech Union on this one? Where are all the free speech broskies? You've got politicians with a track record of lying and using false names to sell get-rich-quick schemes on the internet, trying to silence Gary Lineker for the crime of telling the truth. Here is Grant Shapps, a.k.a. Michael Green, a.k.a. Sebastian Fox, a.k.a. Corinne Stockheath. Here he is being bearded by the inimitable Michael Crick on precisely this issue. And you'll notice, I hope, that I haven't used the word allegedly at any point in this description of facts, because to do so would be absolutely ridiculous.
Mr. Green, how are you?
Very good,
are you
Michael.
Mr. Green today or Grant Shapps?
No, I'm Grant today.
Can we ask you about this book
No,
you published online? Can you assure us that all your online testimonials were genuine people? Can you assure us, Mr. Shapps? Can you assure us, Mr. Shapps, that all the testimonials on your business sites were genuine people? Mr. Shapps? Mr. Green, can you assure us that all the testimonials on your business sites were genuine
Michael,
people?
absolutely.
What about Corinne Stockheath of Surrey? Doesn't appear to be any Stockheath anywhere in the world. There doesn't appear to be a Stockheath anywhere in the world. Is she genuine? Is Richard Wharton of Tech Triops, New York, genuine? Is JLM Richards of the Wallacen Trust? There doesn't appear to be a Wallacen Trust. Is he?
Michael, all I can tell you is everybody is genuine. I'm answering the questions for the essay, and I think that should do the trick.
Grant Shapps is now Secretary of State for Defence. If you're going to make up a name to praise your internet get-rich-quick schemes, the very least you could do by way of due diligence is to make up a name or to attribute a name to a non-existent person that actually exists. So there is Grant Shapps, a.k.a. Michael Green, a.k.a. Sebastian Fox, a.k.a. Corinne Stockheath, being revealed as precisely the character that Gary Lineker very innocuously reminded us of in a completely innocuous tweet. And there's nothing allegedly about it. It's 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
11:48 is the time. How many times have I sat here and said to you, it never happens quickly? It always happens incrementally. I used to use the analogy of boiling a frog a hell of a lot. In fact, my new book opens with that analogy and the discovery that it's not biologically sound. The frog will hop out of the pot, apparently, long before it gets boiled to death. I couldn't discover where the idea came from, that you can boil a frog to death by slowly turning up the heat. But I don't know whether or not this is proof of that particular pudding. But I do wonder where we would have been, even on this programme, on, let us say, October the 9th of this year, if the Israeli ambassador had come out then and said this.
You need to do
two-state solution? Is there still a chance for a two-state solution?
I think it's about time for the world to realise the Oslo paradigm failed on the 7th of October, and we need to build a new one. And in order to build a new one...
Does that new one include the Palestinians living in a state of their own? Is that what it includes?
I think the biggest question is what type of Palestinians are on the other side. This is what Israel realised on the 7th of October. The answer is absolutely no, and I'll tell you why.
Well, then how can there be peace? How can there be peace in
the reason there is no peace
Israel
is because the Palestinians...
without offering a state to Palestine, how can there be peace in Israel?
Israel knows today, and the world should know now, the reason the Oslo Accords failed is because the Palestinians never wanted to have a state next to Israel. They want to have a state from the river to the sea.
So the two-state solution is dead?
Why are you obsessed with a formula that never worked, that created this radical people in the other side? Why are you obsessed with that?
It's 11:49. Sharf is in Watford. Sharf, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First-time caller. I heard what you said about the Israeli spokesperson talking about the Palestinian people as if they are invented and...
Well, it wasn't just a spokesperson, it was the Justice Minister.
Yes, yeah. I'll tell you what, I mean, I worked in Israel sometime, and I know how the Israelis think. I had conversations with them. Even here in London during university days, I had an Israeli friend. He used to come to my home, eat hummus and falafel, and we spoke about the conflict. And he said to me the same thing. He said to me there were no Palestinian people. There were Arabs who came to fight Israel in 1948, and they stayed over there. So that's what they believe. I think.
Well, that's what the people you've spoken to believe, and it's what people like Bezalel Smotrich believe. But I can't let you suggest that that's a popular view in Israel because so many people prove that it isn't. up to and including somebody like Yitzhak Rabin, one of the most successful politicians in that country of the modern era. It just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. But it's clearly a belief that is held quite widely. But you can't come on the radio and say they all think that, Sharf. You must.
I haven't said they all think that.
You did. You said that's what Israelis think. But I appreciate that's not what you meant.
Well, I mean, talking about Yitzhak Rabin, you mentioned that many times during your show. And Yitzhak Rabin himself said, "I wish I woke up one day with Gaza drowning in the sea." You know that?
No, I didn't know that. But his actions as a politician don't play into that narrative at all. The idea of an Israeli-Palestinian peace process was a dream that got him murdered.
Yes, that is correct. I know he was murdered by extreme Israeli Jews, but I mean...
And the man who made the speech about Palestinians being invented called for that assassination to take place and is now Justice Minister. These are the moments where I wonder what people listening who've held very strong views on this subject, I wonder what they do with this knowledge, Sharf. How do you deal with the knowledge that a bloke who called for the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin and who boasted about having nicked a hood ornament from his car and who has a conviction for incitement to racial hatred and who was a member of an organisation that was subsequently proscribed for being a terrorist organisation and who has offered up the most full-throated support for violent settlers in the West Bank, isn't just an Israeli politician. He isn't just in the Knesset. He's the Justice Minister.
Yes, he is. And you know what? The Western Britain and the USA said they're going to ban the extreme Israeli settlers. Why don't they ban those ministers? Why don't they just apply the same sanctions they applied in Russia?
Do you know, in the case of Bezalel Smotrich, they might have to. I suppose you'd have to prove he'd actually been violent himself rather than just a tool of violence or supportive of violence. But but anyway, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Sanctions represent progress, and although I understand why you're calling for even more to be done, it shouldn't be allowed to drown out what has been done. And at risk of invoking the curse of O'Brien, David Cameron, a politician for whom I hold very, 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 very little admiration or respect, given what's happened to the country since he became Prime Minister, has done two things in the last 24 hours that deserve praise. He has met with, actually the last sort of 48 hours, he has met with our friend Sebastian Lai and condemned the Chinese government for the continued incarceration of Sebastian's father, Jimmy Lai. And he has made it clear that violent settlers in the West Bank will not be welcome in this country, will not be allowed into this country. So risk of invoking the curse of O'Brien, which kicks in whenever I say anything vaguely warm about a member of the current Conservative Party. Well done to David Cameron. Thank you, Sharf. I'm cracking on because I've got a caller on the line from Tel Aviv, and I think it would be timely to try at least to include that. Alexander, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
So your producer asked me to speak about the quote from Biden. I'm happy to speak about that and go through it and maybe challenge some of it.
It's not what my producer asked you to speak about. It's what today's phone-in is about.
Yeah, well, that was the question. The last question I heard you ask, it was about can anybody call in and challenge that. So I'm happy to talk about that and anything to do with civilian lives on the Palestinian side being lost. So Ben Gvir, I have it in front of me, the quote, so you don't have to read it out. But Ben Gvir and company, the New Folks don't want anything remotely approaching a two-state solution. That's true. Ben Gvir and his kind of ilk don't really want that.
Nor does Tzipi Hotovely, the Israeli ambassador to the UK.
That's correct. My contention on that one point is that I'm not sure why they would want that. So that's my opinion. I can explain where that comes from. I don't think the two-state solution is the only. Not quoting Tzipi Hotovely, but it's not the only paradigm. I think the world does seem to have some sort of odd attachment to a formula that doesn't work. Again, I know I sound like I'm quoting her, but I'm really not.
I think the last caller touched upon it. The idea of a state where Palestinian people can live autonomously and peacefully.
Right. So there's a whole context to that. I'm not sure. From my point of view, Gaza is not a state, okay? It's not big enough to be a state, and it never will be. The truth is, the reality on the ground is that Gaza will never be part of a state. And so I believe that we have to start thinking fresh. We have to start thinking about alternative solutions, and there are alternative solutions to be discussed, regional solutions. one that does include Egypt, one that does include Jordan, one that does include surrounding Arab nations, one of the many Arab nations.
But you'd need a ceasefire for that to happen.
Well, the ceasefire is not coming anytime soon, and nor should there be. I don't know why there would be at the moment.
Well, then I come to the second bit of Biden's quote, which is they don't want any solution with the Palestinians. They just want to punish all the Palestinians.
Well, that's basically that's on the assumption that the overall war goal is to punish. Where's that come from? Where's the evidence for that?
Well, the death toll.
Death toll. That's not evidence of an overall military aim to punish. I mean, you can argue that it does feel that way.
It is. I think.
No, it's not stated. It's not stated neither privately nor publicly. It's not a stated war goal to punish Palestinians.
Well, let's take the words and then let's take the actions and the numbers. So they just want to punish all the Palestinians. Where's your proof of that? You say reasonably. To which I respond by saying, well, look at all the people who've been punished.
Are you talking about the death toll?
And we should probably include all the injuries and displacements as well, shouldn't we?
Great.
So no, we'll raise it from 20,000 to 1.7 million. People have currently been punished.
Yeah. Okay. So people.
But you want to argue that that's not the intention of the Israeli government. So I'm interested in how 1.7 million people being punished doesn't prove a desire to punish 1.7 million people.
In the cold language of war, that is considered, whether people like it or not, that is considered what's called collateral damage.
Not by me, it's not. By me, it's considered punishment.
Well, in diplomatic language, and no, it's not considered punishment.
Let's talk about the diplomatic language used by the President of the United States of America, so someone who knows something about diplomatic language, and he used the word punish.
Right, and he's wrong. There is no evidence.
Which is entirely your opinion, and now you ask for the evidence, and we say, well, here's 1.7 million people who have been punished. What word do you prefer? Because I think collateral damage is a euphemism for punishment.
I prefer to use the word victims of Hamas. Okay,
right.
This is not me trying to say I've got no issue with any Palestinians being displaced or being killed.
But that's magnificent, isn't it? As a kind of camouflage, because you can kill every single person in Palestine and claim that they were all victims of Hamas.
Well, of course you can, but that's not happening, is it?
Well, that's the direction of traffic. Okay, let's say you can punish every single person in Palestine. The Israeli army can punish every single person in Palestine and claim that they were all the victims of Hamas. I mean, in fact, I'm not even putting words in your mouth. You've already said that.
I would urge you, James, I'm not saying this on an argumentative point of view. I'm saying I would urge you sometimes to select your words more carefully. No killing is being done of all Palestinians. The evidence.
No, we're talking about punish now. Remember the diplomatic language.
But I'm just going back to what you said a second ago. You did use the word killing.
Yes, because if you carry on in the current direction of traffic, your position that what has happened to Palestinian civilians, it makes them victims of Hamas, would also apply in the case of every single person in Gaza being killed by the Israeli army. They'd all be victims of Hamas.
But the mathematical trajectory is not that. It's been how many days has it been? 50-something days?
Which is why I'm taking it back to punish. 1.7 million people have been punished. What word do you prefer?
I told you, victimization.
By Hamas.
By Hamas.
And is there a point at which it becomes punishment? Is there a death toll or a punishment toll at which it becomes punishment, as opposed to somehow the Israeli army is... what is it doing? Enacting the will of Hamas?
I'll answer you. It becomes punishment when there is clear, undeniable evidence of deliberately doing things like shooting people in the head, taking men, women, and children. Please let me just finish this point.
But what about blowing up their buildings?
Good question regarding the death toll.
Blowing up their buildings. That's punishment.
But they don't become. But they're not buildings when they're used for launch pads, are they? They're no longer just buildings. I know you might think that's just an Israeli narrative.
No, I don't. I'm sure some buildings have been used as launch pads, but the justification then becomes that you've blown up all of them.
Enough to kill between 17 and 23,000 people.
Yes.
It's not some buildings, James.
And 1.7 million people displaced. And they're all victims of Hamas.
Well, you can use the word displaced, and in many
cases, what word do you prefer?
Hang on, James, I'm going to tell you. You can use the word displaced if you want. You can also use it as You can also use the word a humanitarian urging to leave a place, because I know that Some people poo-poo it. I know people rubbish it. But the fact is, leaflets are dropped. Warnings are given. Now, better to have them displaced, tragic as that may be, than kill. We could always kill.
Hang on, you were objecting to the word displaced a moment ago.
No, I wasn't. No, I wasn't. I didn't.
You were. I heard you.
I didn't.
You said you have to be careful with words. You said I don't like the word displaced, and then you couldn't think of a better word, and you ended up saying that being displaced is better than being killed.
No, there's no point coming back to a point. I said killing. It's on record. It's being recorded. You'll hear it later on. I said killing. There's no point talking about killing people, killing all of them.
If you're listening on Global Player, you can now press rewind.
Fine. No, that's fine. That's fine. But the point.
No, you can't. You're still talking.
No, I know. Can we try and stick to the point about displaced? You're using the word displaced, okay? I'm saying it's better. Would you agree that it's better to be displaced in a war zone than it is to be simply blown to smithereens? Can we agree on that point?
That's a completely bogus direction and diversion because being displaced is still a punishment.
But it's not okay. But so you can't win then, can you? You can't win.
No, you can't. No, but you should have realised that before you rang in.
Well, I always did. But I'm still up for a good conversation.
1.7 million people have been punished. That's the point on which we can depart in agreement.
No, James, they haven't been punished. They are part of a war zone.
I see. So displacement's not a punishment. It's just better than being killed.
Okay, so what's your alternative?
I'm not here to provide an alternative.
No, you are.
Well, I am actually. The alternative is a humanitarian ceasefire, as requested by 150 members of the United Nations General Assembly and opposed by 10 countries. Go well.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 5 minutes after 12. I tell you what, I do love you sometimes. 2 hours of very, very heavy-going analysis and discussion and even a little debate on the continuing bombardment of Gaza by the Israeli army at the behest of an Israeli government that contains some people possessed of views and opinions and histories much more pungent than perhaps many members of the British media realise. And without even mentioning it, the minute we head towards the 12 noon news, a little late so that we could give Alexander a chance to put his case, the phone lines light up with people getting ready for Mystery Hour. I genuinely love that. It fills my heart with joy that the levity that this hour provides is there even without me needing to remind you, and of course quite possibly more needed than usual. The way it works is this: someone rings in with a question, it could be you, and then someone else rings in excuse me, with an answer, and that may sound a little simplistic or uninspiring. Something weird happens, something very, very weird happens, and magic is created. It's like radio alchemy. That's how I like to think of Mystery Hour. Not only that, but if you have a contribution, if you make a contribution that I consider to be the finest of the day, then you can win a Mystery Hour board game. Just in time, should be with you just in time for Christmas. What's the date today? December the 14th. Well, either just in time for Christmas or just after. I don't know what the details are, but hey-ho, it's the thought that counts. And of course, if you want to get one yourself, then head over to mysteryhour.co.uk. A lovely thing to have under your Christmas tree this year. Full terms and conditions are at lbc.co.uk, and the board game itself, the game itself, is at mysteryhour.co.uk. I think we'll just crack straight on, shall we? 7 minutes after 12 is the time. Mike is in Manchester. Mike, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on.
So I drive on the motorways quite a lot, and quite often I drive under motorway bridges which have graffiti or slogans written on. And I always wonder, how do the graffiti artists get that graffiti onto the motorway bridge?
I've often wondered that as well, actually.
So, because
I've thought that their mate holds them by the ankles, and I'm not making light of it, but that's what I've genuinely thought about it a lot. I'm a bit weird with bridges. I really like them, and I quite like graffiti as well. So it's a bit of a. It works for me. The planets align, and I think that your mate must be holding you by your ankles while you dangle over the bridge.
Yeah, and that was one of my thoughts, right? So do they hold them upside down? Is there some kind of elaborate harness system?
Seems unlikely, doesn't it? Because you're going to have to leg it fairly quickly if the feds turn up.
You never see anybody doing that. So And do you have long poles? But then if you're writing something upside down, it's actually quite hard. I can't do that on a piece of paper.
Do you have to practice? Do you have to practice writing upside down in order to do it?
So, yeah, is there sometimes a little ledge that you can tiptoe out on and do that?
Well, there's a lot of questions going. So really, we need someone who's done it, and they need to tell us how. Because there might not be one catch-all technique, Mike. There might not be one, established modus operandi for doing this. It may be that the.
I can't logically work it out, and I've never seen anybody doing it. So, and I drive on motorways a lot, so. Yeah, I was just curious.
I like it a lot. It is 12:09. It is graffiti on bridges, and it is two subjects very close to my heart. Well done for knitting them closely together. From Manchester to Stockport, actually, which is just up the road, there's a viaduct that joined the two. I can't remember off the top of my head, Peter, whether there is any graffiti on the viaduct, but we may find out later. Question or answer?
It's a question, please, James.
Carry on.
So when I I was in the office drinking a cup of tea, and my little finger was sticking out like the posh people in caricature cartoons do. And it's been bugging me because people were taking a mick and I never realised I did it. And then once, I keep catching myself doing it now. And I'm trying to figure out why. I've got a couple of suggestions of what it might be.
Go on.
But I'm wondering if there's another. So one could be evolutionary fight or flight, in the sense that if you clasp onto something strongly, then it's harder to let go of it and run away.
Yes.
So it could be that I'm just using as minimal effort to hold on to it as possible. The other one could be it's a balance. So the more that I tip, the higher the angle that I tip my hand, or say my pint, the more that my finger.
You do it when you're drinking a pint as well?
Yeah, I do.
Oh.
And my mates laugh about it when I'm in the pub as well. And I think it's that same amount of pressure that I use, or balance, or evolution, let go in case there's an emergency.
But then why would you? So you're claiming you're more evolved than all your mates?
Well, clearly.
Survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's when they get in the bar tab in, it's like you're around, Pete. It's like, well, I get out of the pub as fast as possible.
So why do some people stick their little finger out when they're drinking?
Exactly.
I think Eric Bristow did it when he played darts, and he I don't know, the crafty Cockney. I don't think anyone else did it when they played darts. I remember that being. I remember someone knitting the two together. The fact that some people do it when they drink a cup of tea, and Eric Bristow did it when he was throwing arrows. But I don't know that will be relevant to the answer. But it might work on the balance point. I mean, but then other darts players don't do it. And I mean, Bristow was probably the best of his generation, but I don't know if he was the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And if it was down to the little finger being poked out, then you'd think other people would have adopted the practice as well. That went off in an unexpected direction. Peter, thank you. Why do some people stick their little fingers out when they are drinking, brackets or throwing darts? And how do you get graffiti on bridges, especially big bridges? Very dangerous. Steve's in Crawley. Steve, question or answer?
A question, please, James.
Carry on.
I like my science, but there's one thing that really bugs me, and I'm determined not to Google it. I've been trying to get on with this one for ages.
Go on.
Why does water spontaneously turn into water vapour? I mean, there are three fundamental states of matter: solid, gas and liquid. If you want to get more exotic, you can go to plasma. But why does water, all on its own, turn into water vapour, which is still a liquid, but it floats away, goes up into the sky and turns into clouds?
What do you mean all on its own?
Well, you don't have to do anything to it. Even when it's cold, it does it slower, certainly, but when you apply warmth, it doesn't turn into a gas like it does if you heat up to 100 degrees centigrade.
But water vapour is a gas.
No, it's not.
It is.
Water vapour is still a liquid. No, steam is a gas.
No, water vapour is
a gas.
Steam and vapour are both the gaseous phases of water.
I don't.
So you're
think
getting. No, I promise you, I'm right on this. I don't know why I'm right. I know that I am. And whenever I say that, I've never been embarrassed or proved wrong in a million years. But there are two ways of creating it. So evaporation, which is what you're referring to, and then boiling of water, which more obviously creates steam.
Gaseous. Because clouds are made up of water vapour,
yes,
which are very, very small water particles. It's not a gas.
It is the gaseous
Small
phase of water.
particles.
It's a gas.
No, it isn't. Steam is the gaseous phase of water.
No, vapour is also.
I don't believe you.
Well, that's fine. Who will you believe? Because I can't pull rank on this. I haven't got the qualifications.
There can't be two gaseous forms of something. There can't be two gaseous forms of something.
It's the gaseous phase.
No, steam is the gaseous.
No, they
phase.
both are.
When you look at your kettle,
steam is water vapour. Steam is water vapour.
No, it isn't. No,
it is.
When you look at your kettle, and I remember this from my physics at school, and I'm 112 years old. When you look at your kettle, if you look really close to the spout where it comes out, there is a clear bit.
Yeah,
and
that's the vapour.
Steam. No, that is steam. It turns into vapour when it turns white.
All right,
I'll
put it. So what is that? So the question is water vapour gas?
Kind of, but not really, because I know it's not a gas.
I know it is.
Even though you're arguing with me.
I know it is. What are your qualifications?
What are my qualifications?
Yeah.
Scientific idiot.
What did you get in your GCSEs or your O levels?
I've got an A for me A level in physics.
All right, you're winning. I got an E in my O level.
I'm 67 years old, so they'd only just got rid of dinosaurs.
I got a D actually, not an E. I got an E in statistics. My parents paid a fortune for that. They should have got a refund. I'm putting it on the board, but I think you're going to be embarrassed, Steve.
I'm happy
One of us
to be
is.
embarrassed.
One of
I just
us is.
want a definitive answer. As long as the person who answers it has got some form of qualification.
We haven't heard from the professor of public
host in the country.
Well, you're very kind. That's very kind of you. I shall ask Sheila Fogarty when she gets it. What the answer?
Oh, she's 1B. You're 1A. She's 1B.
You're very kind. So, what is water vapour, or I mean, how does it work? The answer is it's a gas. But Steve doesn't accept that, and he certainly won't accept it from me. The second bit of which is absolutely reasonable. Nor would I, frankly, not on a physics question. But can you help both of us? It's 12:15.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 17 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Mystery Hour is well underway. How do you? Listen, I don't want to be seen to be encouraging this in any way, but how do you do graffiti on bridges and sort of motorway gantries? Why do some people stick their little finger out when they're drinking a cup of tea, or in Peter in Stockport's case, even a pint of ale? Be Robinson's up there, would it? In Stockport, one of the local brewskis. And what is water vapour? Is it a gas? I think if we get an answer to that question, then Steve's question is closed. But you're going to need quite high quality qualifications. He was quite a stickler, was old Steve, with his A in A-level physics. But I think it's a gas. 12:18 is the time. Dan's in Reading. Dan, question or answer?
It's an answer, James, but I'm not too sure whether I've got a gas or a vapour coming out of my ears after that last one.
Go on.
So I have an answer for you about the motorway bridges.
Yes.
There's multiple ways you can do it.
I thought there would.
All of it involves abiding by the dark arts of the 3 o'clock in the morning rule.
Yes.
You can either use a whopping great ladder.
You mean to come up from the ground to the... But there's cars going past and stuff.
There's multiple ways of doing it. You can either do it from that way. You're not obviously going to park your car on the side of the motorway. You're going to park near and walk in.
But that is the thing, is it? So
you
just guarantee on the... You're obviously a graffiti artist, and I suspect that you may have given us a false name in order to protect your identity, and I'm very comfortable with that. And I'm in no way endorsing criminal behaviour, but I do really like graffiti. But it is a thing. You're just banking on the road being so quiet that you can get you can get up and down your ladder quick enough to do a tag or whatever you call them.
Well, it's either that. There's a couple of ways. There's that. There's often people with climbing harnesses on.
Like abseiling equipment.
Yeah, not to give too much away, but very often we may or may not look like we're just doing maintenance on the road.
So not to confirm or deny, for example, wearing a high-vis vest would oddly be quite a good idea in this context.
And a hard hat.
Yeah.
Perhaps. And this is how they get
allegedly.
On the... Yes, allegedly, this is how they get onto the side of very big buildings and bridges. And some of them, there's a ledge, and you can just take your life into your hands and walk across the ledge.
So Mike's got it. Mike's nailed it. So I love the idea of Mike driving up and down the M60 and seeing it and coming up with almost all, in just theorising, coming up with almost all of the things you've described. And thankfully, very rarely, or hopefully never, does your mate grab you by the ankles and dangle you over the edge.
No, it's not like that. He might be spotting your rope, though. He might be spotting your rope.
So you take it very seriously. I mean, the safety is obviously key. Otherwise, we'd probably hear more terrible stories, wouldn't we?
Yeah, there's a few. It does happen.
I know it happens, and particularly on railway track. I don't know why, but I always think of Breakdance 2 Electric Boogaloo at this point, which is a central plot. It's a central plot point of the film, isn't it?
Yes.
You've no idea what I'm talking about, have you?
No.
No.
Too young for that. Sorry.
Qualifications?
Well, allegedly. Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Where can my listeners enjoy your work, Dan?
Not on any motorway bridges.
Round of applause, please.
Thank you.
Take care. And check that film out, seriously. You could probably get it on VHS. Breakdance 2 Electric Boogaloo. Joe's in Cambridge. Joe, question or answer?
It's an answer, please.
Carry on.
So the water vapour.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, you are correct in that it is a gas. So that's sort of first thing out of the way. Basically, water has a property called, it's going to be a big word here, specific latent heat of vaporization.
Specific latent heat of vaporization.
Yeah.
Lovely.
And that is basically the amount of energy it takes to turn the water or any other liquid from a liquid to a gas.
Yep.
So the water isn't turning into a gas spontaneously. There is some energy coming in from maybe sunlight or a flame from underneath the pan or whatever.
Yeah.
And so some of the water will turn into a gas at that point. Usually it would happen at 100 degrees, but not necessarily, because some things already have a bit of energy, and just giving it that little boost will let it vaporize at a lower temperature.
Yep. I think Steve would like a bit of guidance on the difference between vapour and steam, perhaps, if there is one.
Vapour can be for any liquid, whereas steam is specifically water.
But water vapour and steam are the same thing?
Yeah, water vapour is just saying it's the vapour of water, but it has another name as steam.
My friend Scott, while I was talking to Steve, my friend Scott messaged me that he said this is more tense than the Gaza-Israel topic. But you've gone definitive, I think, on this, and I'm not going to gloat, but I was right and Steve was wrong, which is reasonable. What are your qualifications?
I have a physics degree.
That'll do nicely. Round of applause for Joe.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Apparently, I got Beat Street mixed up with Breakdance 2 Electric Boogaloo when the graffiti artist is. I'm not sure I did, Luis, but it's been a while since I watched it, so I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure I can get on my high horse on that one, but I will on the vapour question. 22 minutes after 12 is the time. Nicola is in Berlin. Nicola, question or answer?
I have a question, James.
Yes.
Probably 1,000 times in my life, I might have had a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
And feeling guilty afterwards, I would have a chewing gum. And I never gave it more than 10 seconds thought, but thinking about your mystery hour, I thought I'd just pop the question. Why is my chewing gum dissolving?
Your chewing gum dissolves?
Only if I have chocolate. So there must be some chemical process. I could have Googled it, but I thought it might be interesting for anybody
Google everything,
else as well.
but this is a celebration of accumulated knowledge.
Exactly. So I kept this question for a week for you.
What? So, have you tested it since you came up with the idea of ringing in?
I did.
And you eat a bar of chocolate?
I haven't tested that often, though.
No, I'm intrigued now, because I enjoy chocolate, and I do sort of chew gum sometimes as well. So if you chew, and the whole thing dissolves, so you end up with no gum in your mouth, or it just...
Well, it gets like really gooey. I hope that's the right English word.
Okay.
So it's right after chocolate, so you feel guilty and you think, I should pop in something.
Why does chewing gum alleviate the guilt of eating chocolate?
Maybe it's just the taste, like, I brushed my teeth right now.
Oh, I see. Okay. No, I do vaguely understand that. And when you say dissolve, you don't mean that it disappears. You mean that it
doesn't
dissipates.
Disappear, but it gets really... Yeah.
So the chemical. All right, fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite as confused as I was originally. So the chemical constituency of your chewing gum is affected quite badly by the chocolate still.
Exactly.
Okay, probably sugar then.
It's
probably sugar. It's probably sugar, isn't it?
I don't know. So I just thought maybe anybody else has experienced that as well. I never asked the question to anybody else
fantastic
before.
I mean, I tell you what would be amazing, Nicola, if it was only you that this happened to. If there was something weird about your mouth. You've got some unique scientific...
I could exclude that maybe.
We shall find out for you. Well, presumably everybody, but for now, why does Nicola's chewing gum dissipate and go all weird and gooey if she pops it in her mouth after enjoying a delicious chocolate bar? 25 minutes after 12 is the time. It was categorically Beat Street, not Breakdance 2 Electric Boogaloo. The mad stuff. I already told you how much I love you because you were queuing up to start talking about Mystery Hour when I'd forgotten. I was so heavily embedded in the Israel-Gaza conversation. I'd forgotten that Mystery Hour was up next. The number of people getting involved with the conversation about... it was Ramon. Falls on the tracks after fighting with spit in Beat Street. Jamie's gone definitive. How many people listen? How many listeners must you have to a radio programme to have a significant number, not only au fait with breakdance and graffiti-based films of the mid-1980s, early to mid-1980s, but also minded to get in touch and correct me on the occasion of me name-checking the wrong film? So if you're still listening, Dan, or whatever your name is, if you're still listening, then it's not Breakdance 2 Electric Boogaloo that you need to get your hands on. It is, in fact, Beat Street. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everybody, to correct me on... yes, I know who did the title track, but you're right, and it is Beat Street. Mark's in High Wycombe. Mark, question or answer?
Good afternoon, James. Thank you for taking the call.
You're most
I've got
welcome.
a puzzle for you.
Go on, then.
Why is it that if you go to a supermarket and buy a bottle of scotch or a bottle of brandy...
Yeah.
It doesn't have a flammable warning triangle or diamond on the back of the bottle. It is, after all, a flammable liquid, but it's one of the few things that I can find that's flammable, but it's not marked up as such. You take a look underneath your kitchen sink, for example.
Yeah.
You find some of your stuff that you use to clean the drains and everything else. It will show a series of hazard warning diamonds. It will be flammable, explosive, corrosive.
Yeah,
but why is it?
But you need to. I'm just thinking about. Is it ABV or I'm thinking what would it be? Because denatured alcohol or methylated spirits is going to have the flammable thing on it, isn't it? So maybe they've got
this
more.
This is a bit of a grey area because you see, I used to work as a truck driver a few years ago, and if we were shifting, the company I worked for, we would shift perfume, which again is flammable, and the trailers that we pulled would have to be marked appropriately with flammable liquid
For the
diamonds.
Yeah, of course, when you're transporting it.
But we also pulled whiskey from a big factory in Glasgow, which we took down to Andorra.
Yeah.
That is a 45-foot trailer loaded up with scotch, and it didn't require any hazardous warning markings on that trailer at all. That's puzzling.
Well, it is until it isn't, and it might be as simple as how flammable it actually is. So you only need a warning on something that goes above a certain threshold.
Yeah, there's something called limited quantity, but the thing is, perfume comes in far smaller bottles than whiskey.
But it might have it might be more flammable. It might be more flammable.
It could be the flashpoint of it.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking.
If someone can answer this for me,
well, someone's going to try. Don't worry, you're on the board. I'm just thinking out loud. So, I mean, it's a very seasonal question, isn't it? Because we will be dousing our Christmas puddings in brandy in just 11 days from now, and setting fire to it and enjoying a very obvious flame.
But there you go. You have a litre of flammable liquid, but there's nothing on the bottle to indicate that it's flammable.
So why does alcohol not carry flammability warnings?
Thank you. That kind of sums up the question. I wonder if anyone can answer that for me, James.
Well, let's find out.
Thanks very much.
Mind how you go. Thank you. I like that question, actually. I like it quite a lot. Why does alcohol, given that you can set fire to it and use it as an accelerant, of course, why does it not have any warnings on the bottle? It might put you off your tipple. But I don't know. We shall find out. If you know the answer to that question, or the chewing gum and chocolate question, or the tea and little finger question, the number you need is 0345 6060 Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
12:31 is the time. I think we'll just crack on, shall we? Ian is in Bishop Stortford. Ian, question or answer?
Question.
Carry on.
Why are tins, like you have baked beans, soup,
and that type of thing, cylinders rather than squares for storage purposes? Surely if there was a square, you'd get more in a box than if they were cylinders.
Yeah, they're cheaper to make round.
Is that it? Is that as simple as that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Don't ask me what my qualifications are. I think that must be it, mustn't it?
Oh, I don't know. I've been racking because there's some tins that you can get large tins of Spam.
You can, but they come with a key on them, so that's a different proposition. The square tins on corned beef, we've had that question before, but it was the other way round, oddly. Is that they were asking, why do some things come in square tins? And the answer is for serving with corned beef and Spam, so you can take it out and slice it, and it looks nicer than it would if it was round. So I presume that the extra cost, that where I'm dragging up this knowledge from, is that it costs a little bit extra to
tins of soup have pull rings on them.
They do now, mate, but not back in the day. And it's not, like sardines, square tin, Spam, square tin, corned beef, Fray Bentos corned beef, square tin, and it had a key on it. It was different. So the technology has advanced, but they've not. The reason why, so the square tins are for slicing purposes.
Yeah.
I don't know why the sardines, probably because the sardines want to sit flat in a shallow tin, so it'd look weird if they were. Well, yeah, you can't put sardines in a round tin because half either side of the circle would just be sauce, wouldn't it? There wouldn't be any sardines there.
You get pilchards in a round tin.
You'd have to do you really?
Yeah. Yeah, you can get a large tin of pilchards there round.
And what, are they upside down? Are they vertical?
They're just stored in long ways.
Like anchovies in a little jar.
Yeah, just like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that works. That doesn't. I don't think that threatens my thesis, Ian. To be fair. I think
so it's just the case of that it's cheaper to make that type of tin.
I think it's stronger as well. I think the physics of it, the circular can is stronger for transport purposes, and I'm not going to give myself a round of applause on this, on reflection. So why are all the tins in cylinders when you would, if you were stacking it, you'd actually get more in the back of a lorry if they were all square, wouldn't you?
Or in your kitchen cupboard.
Or in your kitchen cupboard, yeah. Yeah, okay, I like that actually. That's a thought-provoking question. Why are all the tins round? Which is not the same as why are some tins square? I don't think, although we will find out. Ian, mind how you go. I'll just get your name down on my list, and we'll head to Cheltenham. Andy is in Cheltenham. Andy, what question or answer?
Stuart's inquiry, please, James.
Go on.
Water vapour and steam. I think your original caller was correct. There is a difference between...
No, but that's not what he asked.
No. Well, I can answer the question that he asked.
No, I know what you're going to say.
Go on.
Steam is water vapour with water droplets in it.
No, water droplets is an aerosol.
Go on.
So, like when you use like a plant sprayer, or you go to the barber's and they spray water on your hair.
Yeah.
That's an aerosol. That's liquid in air.
Yeah.
And steam is liquid in air.
Yeah.
Water vapour is liquid in air. The steam, the first caller was right. If you look above your kettle, there will be a very small gap which is clear. That's the gaseous state of water.
Yeah.
Above that, where you've got something that looks like a cloud, that's an aerosol. That's water in a gas. That's a liquid suspended in a gas.
What gas?
The air, mostly nitrogen, the air.
No, but it's water vapour. It's water suspended in water vapour when it's coming out of your kettle like that.
It's what? No, it's air. It's like when you spray out of an aerosol, that is an aerosol. So it's small drops of liquid. They are liquid, where all the atoms are bound together.
I think this is a complication rather than a clarification, because the question basically was, is water vapour a gas?
Right, well, the answer to that is no.
Exactly. No, the answer to that is yes.
No, the answer to that is no. Water vapour is a liquid suspended in air. So a cloud.
No, that's what steam is.
No, steam is where each molecule is free to move on its own. A gas, you may remember from your D in physics.
I almost certainly won't.
That you've got the molecules, and when you bind them very tightly together and they bind to each other, you have a solid, and each molecule can't move very far. In a liquid, the molecules are free to move around each other, but they still stay bound to each other so that they fill the shape, they take the shape of the container that they are in. A gas is where each molecule of whatever you're looking at, in this case water, where each molecule is free to move without binding to anything else of its same. A liquid...
But there's no difference between the phrase gaseous phase and gas. Water vapour is the gaseous phase.
No, it is not. It is small drops of liquid.
Okay.
So when you use your plant sprayer and you pull the trigger and something comes out, what comes out? A gas.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's
I'm sorry. I'm just saying yet as an encouragement to you to keep talking. Right, okay. It wasn't. I wasn't agreeing.
When you squeeze your plant sprayer and out comes something, a fine mist.
Okay, so I'm going to read something to you, and then you're going to tell me where you think it came from.
Okay.
Water vapour is also the most important greenhouse gas in the atmosphere.
Okay, it's still not. That's where's that from?
NASA.
Okay, it's not a gas. It is not a gas. That's just common use of. Like you say, there is steam above your kettle. What you're actually seeing isn't steam. It's actually water
Heat radiated from the Earth's surface is absorbed by water vapour molecules in the lower atmosphere. The water vapour molecules, in turn, radiate heat in all directions.
Where did you get this? Did you Google this by any chance, James?
No, I'm just doing this from memory.
Yeah. I thought we weren't allowed to Google things.
I'm allowed to do what I want. I invented all the rules. But that's NASA.
Okay, I'd love to hear your public science guy on this, because it's not a gas. It's liquid in a gas, which is an aerosol. So when you spray out of a deodorant, you can...
Water vapour is water in gaseous instead of liquid form. It can be formed either through a process of evaporation or sublimation. Unlike clouds, fog or mist, which are simply suspended particles of water in the air, water vapour itself cannot be seen because it is in gaseous form.
So water vapour, but that's not what we were talking about.
That's exactly what this is worse than the caller in Tel Aviv. I press rewind. We're totally talking about water vapour.
Right, in that case, I'm wrong. Water vapour is equal to gas, but that's not what your original caller was asking about.
It kind of is, but I think the wriggle room here is that the difference between steam and water vapour.
Yeah.
But water does turn into gas.
Yes, absolutely.
And that I think answers his question. I think you're more right than I am, but you're also wrong.
I think I am wrong because I misunderstood water vapour and steam.
Yes.
But your original caller was asking
because
how can water out of a lake get into the air?
Yes.
And that is to do with molecules being taken off.
Well, it's also to do with evaporation. It's also to do with evaporation. I mean, you can go, or sublimation. You could go from ice into water. But no, I think what we can all agree on, you, me, Joe, who answered the question originally, and Steve, who asked it, I think we can all agree that I am not the perfect person to referee these sort of questions.
I will agree with that, James. But I think you were actually right. Water vapour is the gas, but there is a difference between water vapour, which is what's above your kettle, and steam.
Make it stop now. Give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James.
Cheers, Andy. If anyone else rings in on that, ban them, all right, and block their number. Okay, thank you. Ellie's in Hull. Ellie, question or answer?
Answer, please.
Carry on.
So I feel very nerdy because this is my one niche area that I know about, but I'd like to answer on the alcoholic drinks, so why they don't need to be labelled.
Yes.
So
labelled as flammable for people just joining us.
Flammable. So we've got. I think your caller said, bottles of bleach and stuff under the sink usually has this kind of red and white diamond on it. Used to be an orange and black box for those who remember back in the day.
Yes.
And this is because the red and white, it's a hazard pictogram under the regulation called CLP, which is the Classification, Labelling, Packaging Regulation in the EU.
Right.
We've put it in for the UK as well. It's exactly the same. But that regulation doesn't cover alcoholic drinks. It doesn't cover food. So they are not subject to classification labelling under that particular piece of regulation.
Okay.
They have their own. It's the same reason why, actually, when shampoos sting when they get in your eyes, it's because there are hazards associated with that but cosmetics also don't need to be labelled with hazard pictograms as they would under CLP.
Because it's kind of self-evident, is it?
Yeah, so for something like, if you think about the use, so you're going to be drinking booze, or you're going to be putting cosmetics on your face or washing your hair. So there's much more stringent requirements in those specific pieces of legislation, whereas think of CLP as something a bit more general. So general products might fall under that. So there has to be a bit more upfront information to the consumer, rather than, if you've already done a real deep dive into something like cosmetics, food, something you're eating, it's already covered. The hazards have already been mitigated. You don't need to necessarily communicate a general hazard to the consumer.
Qualifications?
I'm a regulatory person. I've been doing that for about 10 years. My specialty is CLP, and fun fact, it's undergoing change at the minute. So there's a version whatever coming, and I've been involved in that from an EU perspective. So it's literally my baby.
That's incredible. How many people are in your line of work, approximately?
Well, in my particular job at work, I'm one. I work for a big FTSE 100 company, and I'm their CLP expert. There's probably one per big chemical company.
So not that many people in the country then qualified to answer?
Well, a few people might know, but I'm the expert in my bit, which is why I'm very excited.
This is literally what you do for a living. So when this question came out, you couldn't believe your ears.
Oh, I literally screamed, said to my husband, I was like, I know an answer, so I ran into my office to answer it, even though I'm not very well.
No, you've done a great. I'm giving you one of these.
I'm Ray Liotta, and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC.
Oh, this is my day.
They will come.
There you go. No, thank you. There you go. That's Christmas sorted, isn't it? Absolutely.
It is done. Don't need anything else.
Take care, Ellie. It's coming up to 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC. James O'Brien on LBC.
Good Lord, it's 12:47 already. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We still need answers to the wire tins round. Lovely answer to the alcohol question. Chewing gum and chocolate. Why does your chewing gum go weird if you've just eaten chocolate? And why do you stick your little finger out when you have drunk tea? When you are drinking tea. Nick's in Lincoln. Nick, question or answer?
Question, please, James.
Carry on.
Does there become a point where we could add too much weight to a country like the UK, for example, or a continent, or on a bigger scale, the globe?
What, you mean that the ground beneath our feet could break as a consequence of the weight of the...
Yeah, so when we build a skyscraper, for example, we know the foundations underneath it, but do we know what's going on, say, 100 metres below the foundations? Is there a tipping point?
In terms of weight? So, because, I mean, if you've got an unidentified cavern or a sinkhole, that can open up at any time, and I presume weight is going to be part of it. But I'm working on the presumption you're referring to solid ground that stays solid.
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the UK as a whole, for example, we keep developing and importing, say, vehicles en masse.
Right.
Does there become a point where ultimately the UK, the country itself, says, no, we've had enough and sink?
No.
Is it not possible?
No, it's not possible. And I'm going to explain to you why.
Yes.
Right. I want you to imagine that you're in the bath.
Yeah.
Okay? And that your kneecap is poking above the water.
Right.
Okay? Now, there is nothing that can happen that would push your kneecap below the water.
Right, if a skyscraper was built on it, it would.
What, on your knee?
Yeah.
No, it wouldn't.
Right.
Oh, I see what you mean. You think your foot would slide away?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
let me do this differently. I want you to imagine that you're in a very small bath.
Right, a sink.
A sink, perhaps. Oh, this isn't going to work either because your leg would break. I don't think the knee explanation is going to help you here. That's more about why icebergs don't float away. I thought I might be able to translate it into why you're... So there's no... I mean, what about Mount Everest?
Right.
Why has the bottom of Mount Everest not broken or sunk?
Because we haven't developed on top of Mount Everest.
No, but Mount Everest is on top of the ground.
Yeah.
Because I think Mount Everest was always a part of the ground.
No, it wasn't. It would have been pushed up into the air at some point in history by the movement of tectonic plates. I don't know if I can answer your question, so I'll let someone else try. But it's not a question.
Right.
It's based on a. I mean, so if we got the whole population of the world to come to the Isle of Wight, would the Isle of Wight sink?
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
No?
No.
You sure?
Yeah. But I can't tell you why.
Surely everything has its limits. Surely there's a breaking point.
No, it's not really. I mean, I'm going to have to let someone else have a go. I just think, because for me it's self-evident, but that's not good enough for you, is it? Quite right, quite reasonably, it shouldn't be good enough for you. I suppose there'd be at least some sort of example of it at some point in the past. Or, I mean, if it was possible, then Nigel Farage would almost certainly have warned against the danger of the United Kingdom sinking into the sea if we didn't cut down immigration, for example. And if even he isn't prepared to twist the truth that far, then we can be fairly confident that the facts wouldn't even begin to support it. But I shall leave it on the board, Nick. Thank you. You're building on Earth. The Earth wouldn't sink is perhaps one way of answering the question. Glenn's in Basildon. Glenn, question or answer?
Answer, mate. The little finger when you're drinking your tea.
Oh, yeah.
So, right, there's several different theories, and I think the most plausible and the ones that most historians agree on is that it goes back to a medieval custom, and it's known as a spice finger. So basically, you're at a medieval banquet, you're eating with your hands most of the time. You want to keep your little finger up and away from your mouth and also away from the food that you're eating so you don't get covered in sauce or gravy.
Yeah.
Now, in the centre of your table, you're going to have a series of communal pots with things like salt, pepper, nutmeg and various other spices. So if you want to add a bit of spice to your food, you dip your little finger into one of these pots. It's nice and clean. Scoop up as much as you can on the back of your little finger and then sprinkle it across your food.
But it happens involuntarily, Glenn.
That's because we've seen it happen. As far as I know, I'm arguing that it's something learned behaviour.
Yeah,
basically, because I don't do it. I've never done it.
No, I don't do it. I don't think I do it either.
And I know a couple of members of my family do it, but usually the older generation. And I've never actually done it.
So it would be yeah. Well, that would be a reason to do it, like historically, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
But that'll
like
do.
It's like a lot about a lot of the etiquettes that we take for granted, like putting your elbows on the table, for example. That also goes back to medieval feasting, because most of the time you're sitting on a trestle. If you lean on the table, you're going to flip the trestle over.
Yeah, I knew that, actually.
Yeah, you knew that one, yeah.
Yeah,
so
probably because you told me in the past, I don't know.
I don't think that was me, but no, I only learnt that one recently.
No,
but, I mean, no, but like I said, I've been looking at a medieval banquet and food a lot recently. My latest historical rabbit hole of falling.
Oh, yeah.
So I've come across that one fairly recently. But like I said, there are other theories, but none of them really prove it. And I'll say it is a theory, James.
That's good enough for me. No, that's good enough for me. Qualifications?
I'm an absolute history nerd, James.
We know that. And do you enjoy darts? Do you remember Eric Bristow doing that with his little finger, or did I imagine it?
No, my dad throws darts, because my dad was a keen darts player. He used to keep his little finger up as well.
There you go. Maybe a sort of throwback to the... Right, round of applause. Another round of applause for Glenn the historian, please.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. Have a great Christmas. Are you going to deploy any of the lessons you've learned about medieval banquets on Christmas dinner?
Always, every year, mate. They drive me mad. Also, I keep talking to them in Old English. They hate it. Glad you're, my friend. Glad you're.
Another pint of mead, please, for Glenn. Chris is in St Helens. Chris, question or answer?
Answer, please, James.
Carry on.
It's the can question, how they're manufactured and why they're circular. So basically, it comes down to manufacturing cost. It's a lot cheaper and you get a lot more bang for your buck when they're circular.
Even though you would be able to store more in the same space if they were square.
Yeah, but you're using a lot more material if you're making them square. So it comes down to manufacturing cost of the cans themselves.
I have got an amazing answer, which I'm going to add to yours, from, this is lovely, from Princes. You know Princes who make...
Go on. Worked at Princes.
Have you? Well, some of your former colleagues have been in touch via Twitter.
No. I've wrote the software systems for them.
Oh, I see. So this is literally from Princes Limited, proudly helping families to eat well without costing the earth. Home to Princes, Napolina, Cross and Blackwell, Crisp and Dry, and many more famous brands. And they write, cans are cylindrical so they can move around the factory more easily. Round edges can roll. Square would stack well on trucks, just as the round do, but would be harder to move around a factory. Sardines and other outliers are more complicated. Long-time listeners here at Prince's. And then quite cheekily, they say, they provide me with a picture of a transport system that shows the cans rolling down from canning to labelling and suggest that's worth a Ray Liotta and probably a board game as well, which is...
can't do that.
So they didn't phone in, so they can't win anything. You're still qualifying. So I'm going to add that to yours. Qualifications, I write the software for the tin can machines.
Both the presses and the conveyors fill in cappers and all the above, yes.
You're getting quite a few, aren't you, with your...
Well, I'm hoping you can re-sign my book from Manchester, so...
I don't know, I'm more than happy to, but only one signature. I mean, 2 signatures are not worth more than... I think the ones that are going to be worth a lot of money, Chris, are the ones that are unsigned.
I mean, it needs an update and,
for the number that you've received...
Yeah.
Of course. No, I remember now. Sorry, it's getting late. It's 12:56. I'm half asleep. Another way. You can have another round of applause in the meantime. And what is that? What's the grand total now?
2 Ray Liottas, 1 round of applause.
2 Ray Liottas. Look at that. Thank you. John's in St. Neots. Question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on.
It's an answer to the chewing gum question. It's not what's going on in your caller's mouth, by the way. It's actually the fat in the chocolate.
Yeah.
The fat's acting as a solvent, so it's dissolving some of the solids in the chewing gum, making it all gloopy and horrible. I have experience of this myself, not with chocolate.
Chips?
It's definitely not your caller's. Almond butter.
Oh, well, get you. What's wrong with chips? You had almond butter and then you had some chewing gum.
Yeah, I do it. I used to do it quite often until I couldn't handle the gloopiness anymore.
Why would you have an almond butter sort of shot and a chewing gum chaser?
Well, if you're having crunchy almond butter, you want to get the crunchy bits out, don't you?
Yes, okay, fair enough. That makes perfect sense. Otherwise you could get, an impacted wisdom tooth or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That was my fault.
Yes, no, I had that problem with a Snickers once. I enjoyed a lovely Snickers, and a tiny bit of peanut must have got stuck under my impacted wisdom tooth. It got infected. I was in all sorts of trouble, John.
And has it been resolved now?
Yeah, well, it has now, but I now brush that particular corner of my mouth with particular care and attention, and sometimes if I've eaten a Snickers bar or some nuts, I'll go and brush my teeth, even if it's not bedtime or morning time, just to be on the safe side.
Well, nuts. So, do you know what I've done to resolve the problem?
What?
I'll go for smooth almond butter now.
Well, I was going to say that would be an option. That would be... Qualifications?
I've got a degree in chemistry.
That'll do.
And I eat almond butter.
Round of applause for John, please. That is it, actually, for today. Thank you for listening. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Play. I haven't picked a winner for the board game. It's quite tricky. It's got to be Ellie. I know she got a Ray Liotta, and on previous occasions I've suggested that winning a Ray Liotta disqualifies you from also winning the board game. But I invented this game, and I can do what I want. I can even Google stuff if I feel like it. It's just you what can't. You can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player. Congratulations to Ellie, where you can pause and rewind live radio, and you can find out whether words like water vapour or displacement appeared in the course of a conversation with a caller. You'll also find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as the world's biggest podcasts. Pause and rewind live radio on Global Player, where you're always in control. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
Thank you very much, James.
James O'Brien on LBC.